Here we are, guys, in part 5 of this story. What if Naruto was smarter than he appeared to be in the manga? What if he resembled his father more than his mother, both physically and psychologically? Naruto is wise and powerful. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Now, let's begin. The people of the town had rejoiced on knowing that Gato was finally dead and Tazuna could continue building his bridge in peace. The team returned to Tazuna's house to rest. Everyone had been running on adrenaline the whole fight, so after the high was over, everyone was notably exhausted. Naruto had, much to Sasuke's extreme embarrassment, carried Sasuke back to Tazuna's house in bridal style, easily ignoring Easy's feeble attempts to let him go. When Sasuke had demanded Naruto to put him down, Naruto had smirked and in an all too innocent voice, said that Sasuke was too injured and as his teammate, it was Naruto's duty to help him. When Sasuke asked him why he didn't carry him like he did with Kakashi, Naruto smirked and replied, "I just felt like embarrassing you." What Sasuke didn't know was that after the carnage that Naruto performed, he needed some form of relief. Unfortunately for Sasuke, comic relief always worked well for Naruto. Naruto had kept his amusement to himself, lest Sasuke reverted to sticking Senbon and his body from just cursing like a sailor. After that, things in the town were slowly getting back to normal. Naruto and Kakashi performed a raid at Gato's headquarters the night after the battle on the bridge, which they found out after asking for directions from the residents. They were surprised that many of them knew of the place, but avoided it due to fear. They had ransacked the entire place, looking for the money they knew that Gato kept. It was actually a good distraction for Naruto, and a very beneficial one at that. Flashback. Kakashi and Naruto entered the area of Gato, on full alert for any traps that lay ahead. They were here to find and confiscate all the money and valuables that Gato had earned over the years. Kakashi turned to Naruto. "Alright Naruto, here is where we split. We probably don't have to worry about his thugs anymore because he brought them all to the bridge, but just in case there are, be on guard. You will be searching the main building, where the money is most likely kept. I will be scouring the warehouses." Since this country was not that rich to begin with, Gato would not be that interested in what it had to offer, instead letting his thugs have it and concentrating on his business. "I will find the valuables and any evidence that can ensure that Gato's shipping company is shut down for good. All clear." Naruto gave a silent nod and as one, they dashed to complete their respective objectives. Naruto extended his senses and couldn't sense anyone, so he pushed on without hesitating. He blew the front door open with glee that he rarely felt. "Perhaps I should blow things up more often," he mused. He climbed the stairs, carefully checking for traps in places he suspected they would be, but found nothing on the first 2 or 3 floors. He was almost disappointed, almost. He missed it. It was only after he lifted his foot that he heard the subtle click. The door was locked and his danger sense rang, slowing down his perception. He turned around just in time to see almost 50 knives rushing towards him, leaving no space for him to escape. He was insulted. Futon, Topa. And all the knives were blown back. Scoffing, he shook his head and simply jumped on the ceiling. Who would think to lay traps on the ceiling? He easily walked upside down and jumped down in front of the first door he saw. He opened it and looked around, noting that it was Gato's study. Eyes sweeping around, there was nothing worth noting except for a small safe. There has to be something important in there, he thought as he tried to figure out a way to open it. As much as he would like to, blowing it open was not an option as he risked blowing up its contents as well. Eyes roaming around, looking for a clue, he spotted a piece of paper that was sticking out of the lamp. Curiosity growing, he plucked that piece of paper and had to keep himself from cackling like the devil. The safe combinations, laid bare, just like that? Hurriedly, he put in the combinations and watched the safe open. To his mild disappointment, there was only a sealed envelope inside. "Just what is he playing it?" he muttered. Turning it around, his eyes narrowed as his fingers brushed across something. Dried glue, he inspected as he tore it with little difficulty. He took out another piece of paper and read it, seeing a whole new set of numbers written in similar format in comparison to another piece of paper. He chuckled. This guy is just asking to get robbed. Looking around for one last time, noting there wasn't any other safe, he got out of the study and walked down to the last room on the floor. He opened it, and after seeing what was in there, he shook his head in disappointment. Leaving so many doors open, what the hell was he thinking? He asked himself as he walked close to the enormous vault door to put in the combinations. He felt almost bored as he put the combinations. The dwarf's memory must be terrible if he needs clues to remember his clues. He opened the door and barely kept his jaw from touching the ground. Piles of money taller than him stood in front of him. If Naruto had ever dreamed of drowning in piles of money, this would be defined as dreams turning into reality. Let's get to work then. All of this should be pretty useful in helping this country get back on its feet and then some, he decided as he prepared to make some shadow clones, but suddenly a thought struck him. A thought that made his mind start wheeling. From the way he was thinking, all the parties could benefit from this, including him. But first, he needed to know how much money this was. Within a moment, 20 shadow clones popped into existence. Start counting, he commanded. The clones divided themselves into groups of 5 and started counting by dividing the pile into smaller groups. It felt like an eternity, and Naruto feared that Kakashi would suddenly bust through the door, but a call from one of the clones caught his attention as he was looking out on the grounds. "Boss, we are done," he called out. Naruto turned back to see that the one large pile had been divided into 5 smaller groups. He mentally dispelled them and his eyes widened at how much the big pile amounted to. 100 million ryo, he thought, dumbfounded. What the hell was he planning to do with all this money? He asked himself. He pondered over that for a while, in the meantime sending a shadow clone to give Kakashi a report of what he found. Altered, of course. Finally, he came to a decision. Considering that this was a high-class mission, 1 million ryo could be taken from this and ease the burden off Tazuna. From the 99 million that remains, he would leave 90 million for the wave country, while the rest of it, he could take it for himself. Now that would normally make him feel disgusted with himself, taking the money that should go to the people of the wave country, unless he hadn't taken a look at Gato's records. Wave wasn't a rich country to begin with, so Gato didn't have much to siphon off, but what he did was no small figure. 30 million, collected over a number of years, was a very large amount, Naruto believed. That tremendously eased the burden of feeling guilty from his mind. He was giving back 3 times the original amount of money. With a firm nod to himself, took out 3 sealing scrolls. With the help of some clones, he divided the money into 3 parts. 1 for Konoha, 1 for Wave and 1 for himself. He sealed this part first and put it in his right hip pouch just in time as Kakashi entered the room. What ridiculous amount of money! He breathed. Naruto slipped into his normal and innocent mode, the mode he usually used to take the blame off himself after pranks. Keeping his voice level, he nodded and said, "Yeah, makes you want to think what you would do if you had this kind of money." They both looked at the pile of money. Naruto added in, "I already divided the pile up. 1 million for the cost of this mission, 90 million for this country to get back on its feet." He was counting on Kakashi assuming that there was 91 million ryo. Thankfully for him, Kakashi did just that. Kakashi nodded, not suspecting Naruto in the least. "Good, you got some sealing scrolls?" After seeing him nod, he motioned, "Seal them separately and let's get back. I've found what I needed." Hurriedly sealing the other 2 parts, they exited the headquarters. Flashback end. After they came back, it all went downhill. People who had abandoned Tazuna had come back to build the bridge. Naruto and Kakashi had informed Tazuna about the money they had taken from Gato's headquarters. Kakashi told him that he didn't need to pay Konoha for the increased difficulty of the mission since they had already taken it from Gato, which Tazuna thanked Kakashi massively for. A massive celebration was held after the bridge was completed. The celebration lifted Naruto's spirits greatly, especially the part wherein Eri looked like he wasn't the host of a pity party anymore. Naruto was subjected to hero worship, a concept he is grossly unfamiliar with. Nevertheless, he took it in stride and indulged him as best as he could. Finally the day came when the team finally returned to Konoha. They were standing at the end of the bridge, facing a massive crowd. The Konoha shinobi graciously accepted the thanks given by all the people. They faced the family who had hosted them at last. Naruto could say without doubt that he had never seen the small family of 3 so happy before. Eri, it seemed, had finally stopped clinging on to Kaze's memory and moved on. I can't thank you guys enough for doing all of this for us. You have done such a great favor to us that I don't think we can ever repay you." Waving off the protests that came from Naruto, he brightened up even more and said, "Whenever Konoha needs some serious repairs, just call for me and I'll be there." He shook hands with Kakashi and bowed to Sasuke and Sakura, who bowed back out of respect. Turning to Naruto, he offered his hand out to shake. Naruto looked surprised for a moment, but recovered and gave a strong handshake to Tazuna with a genuine smile. "We really are going to miss you, Naruto," he said. Much to his amusement, Naruto blushed a little before acknowledging the man's comment. Naruto looked down to see Inari struggling to hold back his tears. It was a clear failure though, as tears flew like a bursting dam. "You told me not to cry," he said as he furiously wiped his tears. Naruto smiled softly as he knelt down. "It doesn't apply when you are happy, alright? Don't hesitate to cry if you are happy, promise me?" He offered a hand. Inari gave a watery smile but shook Naruto's hand with as much force as he could. "Hey, Naruto-chan." With that, he stood up and with a final goodbye, Kakashi steered his team back to Konoha. A man in the crowd shouted, "What are we going to name this bridge?" Everyone murmured similar things, eyes turning to Tazuna. Inari tugged Tazuna's pants. "Gigi, let's name it after Naruto-chan." A childlike suggestion from a small child, who wanted something that reminded him of the person he looked up to near him. But it clicked perfectly in Tazuna's mind. A full smile blossomed on Tazuna's face at his grandson's suggestion. "You're right. Let's name it, the Great Naruto Bridge." He felt it was a great name, considering how Naruto played a big part in giving the town its hope back, and not to mention, he brightened up their family considerably. The ride back home was not what Naruto's teammates called pleasant. It was a very unfortunate way for them to discover what a speed freak Naruto was. Sasuke's jealousy reared its head when he saw his blonde teammate telling to Kakashi that they are going too slow and he was speeding up and he will meet them at the Konoha gates. That did not sit well with Sasuke. With that, Naruto had ran ahead of Kakashi, who knew exactly what Naruto was up to. He was trying to rile Sasuke up, and judging from the impressive scowl on Sasuke's face, it was working spectacularly. Kakashi was more than glad to sit back and watch the show. Sasuke increased his speed to catch up to Naruto, who would, unknown to Sasuke, smirk playfully and increased his speed so that he was just ahead of Sasuke. This continued until Sasuke was panting to just maintain his speed instead of outright falling behind his whole team. When they reached Konoha, no one was gladder than Sasuke, who was barely standing from all the exertion. Naruto, on the other hand, was barely panting. In fact, he seemed to be in deep thought. Sasuke mustered a glare as best as he could while panting heavily. "You are a freak," he said. Naruto, for his credit, blinked once and turned to him with a confused look. "Huh? Did you say something?" It proved too much for Sasuke, who collapsed. Sakura ran to him, worry written all over his face. Naruto scoffed, and turned to Kakashi, who giving him a strange look. It almost felt like reverence and pride. "They grow so fast," he heard the man mutter while wiping a fake tear from his eye. Naruto rolled his eyes and spoke, "Are we going to the Hokage's office or not?" XXXXXXX. The visit to the old man was interesting. When Kakashi first told him what had actually happened on the supposedly C-rank mission, he took a deep breath and calmly asked the genin to wait outside his office while he had a word with Kakashi. Naruto had figured out instantly what was going to happen and walked out, but not before giving a shit-eating grin to Kakashi, whose eye visibly twitched. He knew that the blonde knew he was going to get chewed out, and he was enjoying it. 15 minutes of chewing out later, they were called back into the office again, where the Hokage congratulated them on surviving the mission and then congratulated them individually on their performance. Though things got a little awkward because he had nothing to praise Sakura for. After telling them to collect their pay from the mission desk, he told them to leave, except for Naruto. Kakashi told Naruto to be at their training spot at 8 before working out. "Naruto, I want you to tell me the truth. Are you alright?" His eyes were full of concern. Naruto smiled softly. "Gigi, I'm fine. I've made my peace with what I did back on the bridge. If I hadn't did what I did, those thugs would have continued to terrorize the town. Also, giving the country a wave to rebuild itself was enough to lessen the burden on my mind," he explained. He rose and searched his face for any sign of lie, and exhaled in relief when he found none. When he had heard it the first time from Kakashi, he was so stupefied that the pipe had dropped from his mouth. Naruto had done exactly what his father had done in the Third Great Shinobi War. He could not stop himself from looking at the portrait of his now-dead successor. Seeing Minato's cold expression, he was reminded of how Minato's mere presence sent enemies running from him. He shuddered as he once again compared the similarities between Minato and Naruto, imagining Naruto instead of Minato. Oh, Minato. If Naruto is even remotely similar to you, he will change the whole world. Of that I have one doubt. Looking back at Naruto, he could swear he had seen Minato standing behind his Naruto, having the same expression on his face. Waving his thoughts away, he said, "All right, Naruto. But if you have to talk about anything, you are welcome anytime," he added a smile. Naruto smiled and walked out of the office to the mission desk to collect his money first. The Chunin sitting there glared at him as he handed the money to Naruto. Naruto only gave a cool smile, further infuriating the man. After taking the scroll, he immediately used the Shunshin to get to his apartment. He had a lot of things to do today. After getting refreshed, he sat down at his table and made a list of what he had to do today. First, put an order out for his Hiraishi and Kunai. They would be a bit different than those of his father. Second, secure the money he had taken from Gato. That was the easiest as it won't be going into the bank. Third, work out a deal to get his special Kunai for free. He would have to work on that a bit. Nodding to himself, he set to work. The first and the last task he would be doing himself, while the middle one can be handled by his clone. He took out a paper and a brush and started sketching ideas for a new seal. The seal would be similar to the Night Dame's Gojo Kibaku Fuda. If he wanted his third idea to work, he would have to offer the Higurashi weapons shop owner something interesting enough in return, as his order was quite tall. Ideas swam in his head as he worked out the original seal. Gojo Kibaku Fuda was a simple explosive tag with a small addition, a replication seal that would create an identical tag. The second Hokage had designed the chakra circuit such that it would first replicate the original tag before exploding. Then the other tag would create another tag before exploding as well, and so on. This would result in a chain of reactions that had the potential to be as powerful as a nuclear bomb. The best thing was only the first tag would be real, the rest would only be copies. He frowned a bit. Obviously, he could not give this exploding tags to Higurashi. The Night Dame must have labeled this as a Kenjutsu for a reason. He chewed on his bottom lip and thought as he tried to think of an alternative. He could modify a normal explosive tag to increase the power, but that was it. What else could he do? His eyes suddenly brightened up as he remembered his battle on the bridge. How he had used the Kunai Cage Bunshin. It was similar to the tandem exploding tags, only it required a bit more chakra. I could simply replace the idea of exploding tags with Kunai. He thought in satisfaction as he set to altering the seal to suit the Kunai. Half an hour, he looked at the tag he had managed to create. It could be mistaken for an exploding tag from a distance, but a mistake was all it was. He created a clone, who took a Kunai and wrapped the tag Naruto gave him. Going up to the roof, he faced the direction where the training fields were. Pushing half of his chakra, he threw the Kunai. Normally, a hail of Kunai suddenly appearing would be a cause of concern, but since it was the clone's Kunai and as such, only a construct of chakra, it would dispel along with the clone. The clone watched with a self-satisfied smile as the Kunai multiplied greatly. Seeing that the tag worked, he dispelled himself, which caused all the Kunai to dispel. Gojo Kunai Renten was a success. Naruto gave a grin of satisfaction as he went through the memories. The tag worked, which means he could now go to the weapons shop. Gathering the tags, he stood up and created a shadow clones, instructions already given. He then used the body flicker to get to the Higurashi weapons shop. Opening the door of the store, he blinked at the girl who was standing behind the counter. She wore a pink Chinese top with a green lower and had her hair tied into buns. She smiled at him. "Hello, what do you need?" Naruto rose an eyebrow at her. It was obvious that she was a ninja from the headband, and a one that specialized in weapons judging from her heavily calloused hands. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto." "You are?" he asked, politely. "Of course." Tenten replied, "Higurashi Tenten, nice to meet you." "Ah, so she was the daughter of the owner," he mused. "Tenten, I need 40 kunai, 30 shuriken and 7 explosive tags," he said. Tenten wrote down the order and said, "Okay, I'll be back soon." As she walked away, he called out, "Tenten." She turned around, blinking at him. "Yes?" Naruto smiled and asked, "Could you also call your father? I have a special order I need to run by him." Tenten narrowed her eyes at him a bit, which he responded by giving a cool smile. Nonetheless, she went to fetch his order and her father. He looked around the shop a bit, blinking when the memories of his shadow clones came to him. He nodded when he saw where the money was hidden, a place that no one except him knew. That would only be used in case of emergency. He snapped back to awareness as he saw a large man coming from the back of the shop. He was heavily built, as expected of a weaponsmith. Even though his large stature added to the intimidation factor, he had a gentle smile on his face. Tenchi smiled as he saw who had requested his presence. No matter how many times he saw him, Naruto only looked more like his old friend Minato. "Naruto, how can I help you today?" Naruto smiled and nodded his greeting. "Tenchi-san, I have a special order that only you can see." He gave an apologetic look to Tenten, who gave a playful pout, but smiled and went inside the shop. Taking out a piece of paper from the counter and a brush, he started sketching. Tenchi's eyes widened as he started to recognize the shape that was being formed. It was the famed kunai of the Yondaime, only a bit different. While Minato's kunai's side prongs were slightly curved in a semicircular shape, Naruto's kunai's side prongs were straight, if not a bit shorter than the original design. The middle prong was also a bit longer. Unusual, like his father's, but not impractical at all. Seeing where Naruto was going with this, he said, "I can see that you want your design a bit different, but it can be done." Naruto then decided to put his proposal forward. "I was also hoping to arrange a deal between us for a future discount on these kunai. A trade, if you will." Tenchi rose an eyebrow in interest. "Oh." Naruto grinned and pulled out the additional tags that he created. "I think you will be very interested in these." In 10 minutes, he explained how the Gojo kunai renden worked. At the end of his explanation, he put his offer on the table. "I keep supplying you these tags, for free. In return, you supply me the special kunai, for free. A fair trade, considering their battle potential." Tenchi rubbed his chin in thought. He could see that the tags had a very high chance of selling. Hell, he might even say that the value of the tags were higher than the tri-pronged kunai, as it was only an oddly shaped kunai and nothing more. Still, he needed to see how much thought Naruto had put into making these tags. "I don't know, Naruto. Don't you ninjas have a jutsu that multiplies the number of kunai as well? Why would they use this tag and not that jutsu?" Naruto had half expected this question, so he answered, "The kunai Kage Bunshin is a variant of Kage Bunshin, so it uses up a large amount of the user's chakra, leaving them very little chakra and a high risk of getting chakra exhaustion quickly. In my tags, you only have to push a little chakra to multiply the number of kunai by large." Tenchi grinned. "You have a deal, Naruto. As long as you keep supplying these to me, you can get your order for free." Naruto grinned and held out his hand for Tenchi to shake. "Then we have a deal. You can keep these tags, so how long before I can get 30 of my kunai?" Tenchi shrugged. "You can collect them from me tomorrow." Naruto smiled and nodded, walking out of the store after collecting and paying for the order he gave to Tenten. He blinked when he saw it was already early evening. Might as well get some training done. Master those jutsus back from the wave, he decided as he made his way to the Senju library. He proceeded to spend the entire night training with his shadow clones, which were in an absurd amount of 200. Sudden, Daibakufu no Jutsu, to his pleasant surprise, required him to reduce only 2 more hand seals, bringing the number to 8. The Saryuden, on the other hand, would require much more training. Reducing the hand seals to 30 was good and all, but the Nidaime was able to do it with just 4 hand seals. Finishing his training for the day, he turned in, exhausted more than he would like to admit. XXXXXXX. Naruto had a very uneventful start of the day after. He got up at 5, did his regular running routine with increased resistance, came back and showered. He ate omelets for breakfast, played around with seals until it was 10 minutes to 11 and then went to meet his teammates, who were irritated and angry at Kakashi again. He thought that maybe Kakashi might give them something interesting to do, like another C-rank mission or some training. But no. They did some lame D-rank mission of taking the weeds out of someone's garden, before Kakashi dismissed them, saying something about keep training. After that, he was aimlessly roaming around, thinking about what happened after their mission. It was the only highlight of his day until now. Flashback. Alright, you are dismissed, Kakashi said in his ever-lazy tone, eyes not moving from his book. Naruto groaned, come on, Kakashi-sensei. It is only noon right now, we have half the day to do some training. While Sasuke and Sakura didn't say anything, Naruto knew even they wanted something interesting to happen. Kakashi calmly flipped a page. Naruto, I dismissed you already. You can do your own training now. He looked up from the pages. Trust me, it's better that you all train by yourself right now. Perfect whatever you have learned until now. I smiling, he was gone in a puff of smoke. Sakura turned to Sasuke, blushing lightly. Sasuke-kun, would you go out with me today, now that we're free? As usual, Sasuke scoffed and walked away saying, you heard Kakashi-sensei. I'm going to train myself. He looked at her from the corner of his eye. It's better that you do too. Right now, you are the weakest member of this team. Naruto winced at his teammates' blunt words, but what he said was true. A simple punch was enough to take Sakura out, which was not a good thing. Shaking his head, he formed a half-ram and vanished into wind shunshin, leaving Sakura to her thoughts. He was walking towards a dango shop when he saw Team 10 coming out, chewing on some dango. Smiling, he walked towards them to catch up with Shikamaru and Choji. Oi, Shikamaru, Choji. The mentioned genin looked up in surprise and smiled when they saw Naruto waving towards them. Yo, Naruto. Shikamaru gave a lazy wave while Choji was more enthusiastic. Ino, on the other hand, scowled a bit. She never liked Naruto. He was too loud and annoying according to her. Naruto stopped in front of them. What's up? Where's Asuma-sensei? Choji replied, Asuma-sensei dismissed us for the day. What about you, Naruto? Naruto shrugged and responds, Kakashi-sensei dismissed us early too. Very unusual of him, if you ask me. Ino couldn't hold back her sneer. Well, no one's asking you. Naruto glanced at Ino and rose an eyebrow. Nice to see you too, Ino. That was all he said before he turned to Shikamaru, asking if he and Choji could spar with him. Shikamaru sighed, muttering troublesome under his breath, but agreed along with Choji. It would allow them to see how far they have come. Though he knew that they wouldn't be defeating Naruto anytime soon. Ino scoffed, smirking at Naruto, you really shouldn't be asking to spar with Shikamaru and Choji. They would wipe the floor with you, dead last. Choji did not like what Ino implied and he prepared to defend Naruto. When Naruto spoke before him, amusement written all over his face. Oh, really? Ino nodded, even I could kick your ass. I bet that on the C-rank turn to rank your team went on, Sasuke-kun saved your ass and defeated Zabuza. Naruto looked confused and asked Shikamaru, how do you guys know about that? Shikamaru replied, Asuma-sensei apparently heard it from your sensei and told us. Naruto nodded and turned back to Ino. This was the perfect opportunity for him to teach Ino a lesson about how to not act like a bitch. He asked her, how about a spar, Ino? If you said you can beat me, then I wouldn't mind a workout right now before losing to you. Ino smirked, thinking she could easily beat him. Then let's go. Training Ground 10. After they reached there, Naruto and Ino stood in front of each other, with Shikamaru acting as the referee. This is only a spar. You only knock the other unconscious, not kill them. Are you ready? Even speaking in his lazy tone, he sounded serious. Must be a Nara thing, he mused. Naruto and Ino nodded, falling into their stances. Shikamaru chopped the air, Hajime. He fell back after that. Naruto, keeping his guard up and deciding to bait Ino, relaxed and put his hands in his pockets. Ino scowled and asked, what the hell are you doing? Naruto cleaned his ear, it's just that you don't threaten me Ino. Ino snarled and dashed forward, throwing a punch, intending on breaking his nose. Her anger turned into shock when Naruto simply stopped her punch with one hand. He didn't even look like he tried. Shikamaru and Choji were surprised as well, but not as much as Ino. They knew Naruto was not the dead last, even in academy. If anything, he was perhaps the strongest of the rookies. Tano's going to get beat up, isn't she, Shikamaru? Shikamaru simply hummed in response. Ino was getting very frustrated. Naruto was dodging her attacks like he had all the time in the world. And he was blocking them like they had no power behind them. She decided to goad him. HMPH, are you too afraid of countering? Or you don't know how to counter at all? Naruto was quickly getting bored of Ino's pathetic attacks and pathetic ways of goading him. Better to end this, otherwise I'm gonna fall asleep, he thought. Catching a punch that was coming towards his face, he gave a devastating punch to her gut, knocking the air out. He didn't even give her time to fall to her knees, following with an uppercut to her chin that was strong enough to straighten her up and finishing off with a spinning back kick that knocked her a few feet back. Ino was barely keeping from crying in pain. Her stomach felt like someone had been jumping on it for an hour, and she was pretty sure a few of her teeth were knocked loose. She barely registered Naruto's mocking voice. You sure showed me, Ino. You're just as pathetic as Sakura. What were you saying about kicking my ass again? Gritting her teeth, she fought the pain and began to form hand seals, only to get knocked out. Naruto shook his head. Some people are nothing but full of air. He then glanced at the other two, who were barely surprised. Well, patch her up and tell her that the next time blows hot air, it better be fire for her own sake. With that, he walked away. Flashback end. Naruto was snapped out of his musings when he heard something behind him. Glancing back, he barely registered the urge to smack his forehead when he saw a brown box with 2 holes facing him. It was an eventful day, meeting the old man's grandson. He had managed to, somehow, become a rival of Konohamaru and becoming the Hokage. He had knocked some sense into that boy's head, showing him that not everybody bowed to him just because he was the Hokage's grandson. Ever since that day, he became an object of hero worship. Turning to the box, he said with some exasperation, Konohamaru, square boxes with holes don't exist, you know. A squeaky, muffled voice came from the box. Wow. Discovering my presence this early. As I expected from my rival and my hero. There was a bright explosion of colored smoke, from which 3 figures emerged, coughing. Hey, you used too much powder. It was then they noticed Naruto looking at them with something akin to amusement. Naruto was looking at Konohamaru and 2 other kids he had never seen. One was a boy with black hair, glasses and a runny nose. The other was a girl with orange hair, a slight blush on both of her cheeks. Konohamaru grinned up to Naruto. Boss, you have some time, right? Naruto looked confused at what he was trying to say at first, but he quickly pieced it together. Hyper 8-year-old kid with friends, asking if he was free or not. Yep, they wanted him to play ninja with them. How about you humor them? Kurama asked with a grin. Naruto rolled his eyes. If I humor them, Kurama, I would be stuck with them all day. That is something I don't want to do, he said with resignation. Turning his attention back to Konohamaru, he said, while I do have some time, I won't be playing ninja with you. You guys get too carried away. He tried to gently let him down. Then something struck him. Hey, you haven't introduced your friends. Who are they? I'm Uden and I like numbers. The black-haired boy greeted in what was the deadliest voice possible. And I'm Miji. The most beautiful kunoichi in Konoha. The orange-haired girl said in a bubbly voice. Naruto smiled. God, how innocent these kids are. What's the point of a ninja playing ninja? A voice that sounded detached came. All of them turned to look at Sakura, who looked like someone had just told her Sasuke was gay. Naruto's expression became his usual bored, indifferent look. Sakura, what are you doing here? Before Sakura could reply, Konohamaru nudged Naruto with a sly look. Hey boss. HM. She's your right? He asked, holding up a pinky with a smirk. Naruto chuckled. No Konohamaru, she's just my teammate. That seemed to fire up Konohamaru even more, just what I expected from my rival. Her forehead is huge and her chest is flat as a board. Naruto's head snapped to Sakura to see her reaction. Konohamaru might as well have signed his death. Sakura's mood did a full 180 after hearing the kid wearing the blue scarf. She got a menacing look on her face and cracked her knuckles, clearly saying you are dead. Naruto pushed Konohamaru. Run kid. I'll meet you later. Konohamaru needed more pushing as he ran in the opposite direction with his friends, screaming in horror. Naruto shook his head and made to follow him, ignoring Kurama's chuckles. That kid has a lot to learn, he thought as he made a shadow clone who took after Konohamaru while he took a different path. If he was fast enough, his little rival wouldn't have bumps in his head. He kept his sensing active to track Sakura's signature and made his turn such that he would meet them in the opposite direction. What he did not expect was face the back of two shinobi his age, one boy and a girl, the boy holding up Konohamaru who was terrified. That's not good, he thought as he perfectly switched with his clone, and that was when he got a good look at the foreigners. The one that held Konohamaru honestly looked like a cat, with how his headwear looked. He was wearing face paint of all things, black sandals, black shirt and black pants. The other one was the one who caught his attention in a way that no girl had caught before. He somehow couldn't stop staring at her. She was, by far, the most beautiful kunoichi he had ever laid his eyes on. She wore a single light purple-colored, off-the-shoulders garment that extended to halfway down her thighs, with a red sash tied around her waist. She wore a fishnet over her exposed shoulders, along with on her left thigh and right calf. She was also carrying a large fan on her back. She had her hair tied up in 4 ponytails, with a rather developed chest for her age, which he guessed was a year higher than them, curves in all the right places, slightly tanned skin, sandy blonde hair and alluring teal eyes. Temari noticed the blonde boy staring at her and couldn't help the slight blush that came onto her age. He was pretty tall, easily a bit above 5 feet, and obviously well built if how his clothes fit him were anything to go by. His hair, to her pleasant surprise, was a very golden shade of blonde, bordering on yellow. She looked at his eyes and her blush darkened a bit. His eyes were the most beautiful azures she had ever seen, staring at her with curiosity and something else she couldn't identify, but it gave her a warm feeling. She shook her head and focused on her brother, who was glaring at the kid with annoyance. That hurt, you damn brat. He was clearly pissed off. Naruto decided that now was the time to intervene and with a hidden signal to his clone, spoke up, you might want to put him down, Kabuki boy. That only seemed to piss him off even more. Yeah. What if I don't? He then froze, getting the unmistakable feeling of a kunai on his neck. I don't need to say it, right? Temari looked with wide eyes as the blonde who was standing before them had somehow made a clone who was holding a kunai to her brother's neck. And they hadn't even seen him move. He's good, she thought as she saw Kankuro grudgingly release the boy, who ran and hid behind the blonde's legs. A second later, a pebble hit his hand, which he clutched in pain and cried out, who did that? Naruto couldn't help the sigh that came out. Didn't he say he was going to train? He had already sent Sasuke, who was standing on the branch of the tree behind him, bouncing a pebble in his hands with a superior look on his face. Interestingly, he also sensed another guy, who was giving off a very malicious feeling and oozing off killing intent like nobody's business. Deciding to address it later, he turned his attention back to in front of him. Sasuke-kun! Sakura shrieked. Naruto rubbed his ringing ears at the terrible soprano. Temari looked at Sasuke. He's cute, but he's nowhere as handsome as the blonde, she smirked, eyes turning back to check Naruto out. Kankuro snarled and made to grab the package on his back, which Naruto deduced to be a puppet judging from their sand headbands and the fact that Suna is known for puppets, when he decided to intervene. Temari asked, "You're going to use Kureishu, Kankuro?" Wait. His sudden exclamation momentarily stopped the sand shinobi momentarily. He pointed to the tree behind him. I just wanted to know if the guy standing behind my teammate is with you or not. Both of their eyes widened along with Sasuke's, who whipped around to see a redhead standing upside down on a branch behind him. He had a kanji for love on his forehead, teal eyes with black rings around his eyes, giving him an appearance like a tanuki, and he was carrying a gourd on his back. He disappeared in a whirl of sand and reappeared by the side of the puppet kid. Kankuro, stop it. We're not here to cause trouble. Stop embarrassing our village, he spoke in a voice so cold that even Naruto shivered. However, the reactions of the sand shinobi were even more scared. Kankuro stammered out an apology, Gaara. They started it. They? Shut up, or I'll kill you, Gaara said in his deadly voice. Kankuro shut up immediately. Gaara turned to the Konoha shinobi, apologies to you guys. They made to walk off when Sasuke jumped in front of Naruto and demanded in an arrogant voice, "You there? What's your name?" pointing to Gaara. All three of them turned, with Gaara speaking, "Sabaku no Gaara. What's yours?" Sasuke gave off a challenging smirk, "Uchiha Sasuke." "I wasn't talking to you," Gaara said monotonously, eyes turning to Naruto, who straightened up. "Uzumaki Naruto," he said in a strong voice. Eyes shifting to Temari, he smiled and asked, "What's yours?" Temari smiled in return, "Sabaku no Temari, nice to meet you." They looked into each other's eyes and kept staring, neither wanting to look away. Unfortunately, Sakura chose this moment to speak up. "Listen, although Konoha and Suna are allies, our treaty prevents shinobi from entering each other's villages without permission. State your purpose." Naruto simply looked on, his face not betraying anything. Temari spoke up, holding up her passport. "As you can see, we're genin of Sanagaku no Sato, Kaze no Kuni. We've come to this village to take part in the Chunin exams." She gave a mocking smile to her. "Don't you know, being the genin of the host village?" Naruto gave a shake of head from behind Sakura, clearly mouthing, "Our sensei hasn't informed us yet, Temari." Temari had thankfully seen him and received his message, giving him a nod. The three Sand siblings then turned and walked away, leaving Team 7 with Konohamaru and his friends. XXXXXXX. You all should already know why people from other villages are here. The Hokage addressed the assembly of Jonin and Chunin. Kakashi spoke up. "Is it that time of the year already, Hokage-sama?" Asuma replied to him, "I believe so. I have already seen a few shinobi the age of our genin in our village." Kurone spoke up. "When is it, Hokage-sama?" 7 days from now, Kurone-chan. Now, will all the Jonin step forward who are in charge of the newest batch of genin? Asuma, Kakashi and Kurone stepped forward. He rose and gave them a contemplative stare and asked, "Do you wish to enter any of your genin in the exams?" Kakashi spoke up. "From the squad that I lead, Team 7, I recommend Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke and Haruna Sakura to the Chunin selection exams under the name Hokage Kakashi." Asuma spoke next. "From the squad that I lead, Team 10, I recommend Orochimaru, Akimichi Chouji and Yamanaka Ino to the Chunin selection exams under the name Sarutobi Asuma." Kurone was the last. "From the squad that I lead, Team 8, I recommend Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba and Abiram Shino to the Chunin selection exams under the name Yui Kurone." The crowd behind them erupted into murmurs. All three of them nominated their teams. All the genin being entered are fresh rookies. It's been so long since rookies have been entered in the Chunin exams. Iruka, who had been standing in the back and watching his former students, who were not even 1 year into their career, get nominated for the Chunin exams, could hold it anymore. "Please wait, Hokage-sama. Permission to speak?" He rose and gave him a silent nod to continue. Iruka then spoke frantically, "Excuse me for saying this, but your 9 students were once my students in the academy. They need more experience before they enter the Chunin exams." Kakashi knew that Iruka was worried about Naruto, but he was now Kakashi's student, not Iruka's. So he spoke up in a serious tone that betrayed his lazy posture. "I became a Chunin when I was 6 years younger than Naruto." Iruka's comeback was spot on. "Don't compare Naruto to yourself, Kakashi. He is different." Kakashi knew that Naruto could easily ace the exams, but he addressed the issue that was common among all genin. The genin are starting to believe that a shinobi's life is easy. Putting them in dangerous situations might set them straight. Iruka began speaking, "But they are not your students anymore, Iruka-sensei. They are my subordinates now, and as such, I am the one who will make such decisions for them," he sternly reminded the gentle Chunin-sensei. He rose and spoke to the defeated Iruka. "Iruka, I see where you are coming from." Iruka lightened up a bit, "which is why the rookies will be put through a special preliminary round." Dismissed. As soon as the siblings left, Naruto bought a hasty goodbye to Konohamaru and sunshined out of there straight to Training Ground 6. That team, he noted, doesn't train much, so they wouldn't mind him using their training ground. As he created a few shadow clones for sparring, Kurama briefly brought him into his mindscape. "Naruto, do you know why that boy felt so familiar to you?" he asked, tails swaying behind him as he looked at Naruto. Naruto folded his arms. Good to know that it wasn't just me then. I believe that he's another Jinchuriki. Kurama nodded. Exactly. But be on guard, his biju is dangerous, and because of who is inside him, it's possible that the boy is completely mad. Naruto tilted his head curiously. It's not every day that the nine-tailed fox says someone is powerful. Just who is inside him, Kurama? The one-tailed raccoon, Shikaku? He is the weakest of the tailed beasts, and batshit insane. He said it with a serious face, at which Naruto would have laughed if not for the fact that he realized that another Jinchuriki is roaming unchecked in Konoha. Jinchuriki, according to the stuff he has read up until now, are usually sent into other villages so they can burn or crush it into the ground. And he didn't see any person with Gaara who was in charge of him. Kankuro and Temari certainly couldn't control him, evidenced by how much afraid they are of him. Kurama continued, you noticed the black rings around his eyes? It means that he hasn't slept in years, probably. Naruto went wide-eyed at that. What the hell? Kurama nodded in complete seriousness. Suna doesn't have any great seal masters, so the seal on that Jinchuriki is quite loose, compared to yours. If the host falls asleep, Shikaku will take control and come out. Best be on guard, because he already got you in his sights, no doubt from sensing my presence within you. Naruto agreed. Thanks for the warning, Kurama. I'll keep it in mind. With that, he exited his mindscape and focused on the defending exercise. As he blocked and dodged every strike from his clones, he hoped that Kakashi would enter them in the Chunin exams. Then another thought came to his mind, more specifically, a person. He smiled wistfully as he punched a clone in the ribs, dispelling it. He had never seen such a beautiful girl ever before. Then again, there weren't many girls of his age in Konoha, and Ino and Sakura didn't count. He knew from the day he saw them that he wouldn't be liking them anytime soon. Temari was different, however, in a good way. Her looks were quite exotic, especially her eyes. He had never seen eyes of that color, and he had to admit, it was quite easy getting lost in them for him. He knew, from his own observations, that his own eye color was one of the kind in all of Konoha. Her being a blonde like him was only a plus point in his eyes. From what he had observed and could tell, she and the two other shinobi were siblings, with Temari being the oldest. It was pretty easy to reach that conclusion. Temari and Gaara shared the same eyes and facial shape, but Temari shared the shape of her eyes with Kankuro, not to mention the way she acted with him. Very much like an older sister who was used to bashing her brother's head but didn't because they were in public. And that smirk, Okami. He could say with full certainty that it was the sexiest smirk he had seen among the girls of his age, which was quite ironic seeing he created the sexy jutsu. Her smile was not far behind, though it could easily beat her smirk when coupled with a very pretty blush that came over her face while she was looking at him. He could not wait to see her again. XXXXXXX. Team 7 was standing on the bridge and as usual, waiting for their tardy mess of a sensei. It had been almost 3 hours, when Sakura finally cracked. With a scream of frustration that no doubt scared the birds resting a mile away, she ranted, "Arg! Why does Kakashi-sensei always make us wait when he is the one who always calls us?" She began ranting about she had woken up late and hadn't had the chance to blow dry her hair. Naruto and Sasuke glanced at each other, sharing a look of shared suffering. While Naruto had just turned up 20 minutes ago, he still couldn't bear Sakura's incessant nonsense. Why the hell does she have to be so damn loud every time? Was the thought that went through the boys' heads. Naruto finally sensed Kakashi's presence heading their way and straightened up. Sasuke, who had learned to read Naruto's body language after a while, straightened up as well, knowing that his teammate had sensed someone coming their way. True enough, there was a puff of smoke, which turned out to be Kakashi. Waving a hand at them, he had the nerve to cheerfully excuse himself, "Hello there. I got lost on the road of life today." "Only someone like you could get lost on a one-way road," Naruto grumbled, hands in his pockets and giving Kakashi a deadpan look. "I'll pretend you didn't say that and get to the point." He held up 3 application tickets. "I nominated you 3 for the Chunin selection exams. You are not forced to take it, however. You have a choice whether to take part in it or not." How he managed to say in his ever-lazy tone of voice and still sound serious was beyond Naruto's understanding. Must be innate talent, he mused. "Though if you do decide to take them, go to the academy in 6 days at 3 in the afternoon. Room 301, he added. They were dismissed after that. Naruto suggested that they get lunch together, after which they can go their separate ways to train. While they were walking to Ichiraku Ramen, Naruto noticed that Sakura looked quite uncertain, which matched the feeling of her chakra. Something bothering you, Sakura? Sakura blinked and looked at Naruto, a nervous smile appearing in her face. And no, Naruto. Everything's fine. Sasuke too noticed her behavior, but kept quiet. As long as she was ready for the Chunin exams, it was fine. Naruto, on the other hand, had doubts. He knew that Chunin exams were no joke. Ninja from all the villages participated, and at times, death happened. He would be scared too, if he didn't train his ass off every day. Hope this exam teaches you a lesson, Sakura. The world of shinobi is not a place for fangirls, he grimly thought to himself. They went into the bar and were greeted by Teuchi with a warm grin. Oh, Naruto and his team. Come and have a seat. Naruto grinned. Old man Teuchi never failed to bring a smile on his face. His amusement grew when he heard Sasuke mutter, "Stop saying it like he's the leader of this team." As they sat down on the stools, Teuchi asked for orders. Naruto was the first to speak. "I'll have 2 miso ramen, please." Sakura spoke next. "1 toroniki ramen, please." Sasuke was the last. "I'll have a tonkatsu ramen, thank you." Naruto envied the way Sasuke ordered his food. The arrogance came so natural to him, Naruto wished that he could do it as well. He turned to Sakura, who looked worried about something. Come to think of it, she has been acting strange ever since the topic of Chunin exams came up, he thought. It's not that strange for weaklings to feel this way when they are faced with the unknown, Kurama offered his view. Naruto rolled his eyes and ignored the comment, though he didn't deny it either. So, he decided to talk to her. Speaking in a low tone, he asked her, "Sakura, how do you feel about the Chunin exams?" Sakura was startled when he suddenly spoke to her. Calming down herself, she was about to tell him to mind his own business when she met his eyes. So full of sincerity, and he seemed to genuinely want to listen to her. She hesitated, not sure of how she should say it. It's kind of scary, you know? Right now, I know that I'm not ready, but when will I know that I am? Her thoughts were very much jumbled up right now to be phrased properly. Naruto said nothing until their order arrived. He separated his sticks, and as he waited for it to cool a bit, he spoke. "I won't sugarcoat my words, Sakura, but you haven't trained seriously since the academy, and even then, you probably did the bare minimum of what the instructors told to do, didn't you?" Her silence and shameful expression told him that his deduction was spot on. A side glance also told him that Sasuke was eating his food quietly, not paying any attention to them. But that did not fool Naruto, who smirked when he observed Sasuke's body was tilted towards their side. He continued, "Ever since the academy and even after when our team was formed, you kept neglecting your training in favor of pining after Sasuke, even going on a diet in the process." He didn't stop eating his food at all, looking as if talking about the weather. Sakura felt like she wanted to find a hole and climb into it and never come out. She wanted so badly to tell Naruto to shut up, but bitter truth and his words stopped her from doing it. She would be lying to herself that she did not know what Naruto was talking about. Naruto kept a careful eye on the pink-haired girl. Now that she had seen her situation laid bare in front of her instead of being buried deep inside her mind, it was time to let her know of the consequences. Now look at yourself. You don't have the physique required for a strong kunoichi, your neglect of training means you have no grasp of the basic skills to improve further upon them. Your weapon throwing is mediocre at best. All you have is excellent chakra control, but let's face it, you aren't the only one who does. Kakashi-sensei said that you are a genjutsu type, but you don't know any genjutsu, nor can you dispel one, as proven in the Bell test. In short, one hit is all what anyone needs to take you out. He finished his meal and was now looking straight at her. He won't stop now. Sakura needed to hear this. It was time she faced the facts. Sakura was barely keeping from bursting out in tears. Everything Naruto said was true, and while she hated to admit it, the facts made her sound pathetic. Ever since the academy, she had only increased her efforts in impressing Sasuke instead of bettering herself. She had repeatedly told herself that Sasuke would save her whenever she would be in danger. Her being with Sasuke on the same team only reinforced that belief. But in the C rank turned A rank, She felt for the first time that she was the one who was utterly useless on their team. What was worse was that she did not do anything to change it after returning, still hoping to get together with Sasuke. Oh, one hit? Am I really that pathetic and useless? She knew the answer to that question. While she did have some natural strength, it was useless to her if she did not know how to use it. Naruto and Sasuke were strong too, but what made them strong that they had the strength to take a hit and get back up, only to dish it back with even greater ferocity. Sakura could dish it out, and even that was questionable, but couldn't take the punishment. She couldn't take a punch to her gut and have the strength to get up. Naruto had been quietly watching Sakura and he had to say, the girl looked just one more truth away from bursting into tears. He had, while Sakura was wallowing in guilt, quietly motioned Sasuke to leave. The dark-haired boy had looked outraged that Naruto was waving him away like a servant and had almost tore into him when he saw the serious and somber look in his eyes. Naruto had mouthed to him that Sakura would be heartbroken if she were to learn that Sasuke saw her in her moment of weakness. So he quietly finished his food and went outside, leaning against the wall and waiting for them. Now that the tough part of learning about the consequences was over, it was time for some motivation. He changed the topic of the conversation. Idly spinning the chopsticks between his fingers, he said, I saw Team 10 the other day. He quietly cheered when he saw the tiny spark of interest in her eyes. On Team 10 was Sakura's rival, Ino. Oh. Yeah, an Ino challenged me to a spar. Can you believe that? He gave an amused shake of his head. Sakura, too, gave a small chuckle at that. Ino had no chance of defeating Naruto when Sasuke had trouble just trying to match him. She was a bit less pathetic than you, but pathetic all the same. Isn't she your rival, Sakura? By now, she found it easier to concentrate on the conversation than her guilt. Yes, she is. Naruto adopted a look of confusion. Then why are you not trying to beat her? You don't want to lose Sasuke to her, right? That did catch her attention, because her eyes now held a little panic. What do you mean by losing Sasuke? Naruto debated whether to tell her or not. This was the true key to motivating a person with a rival, bring a common goal in between them. Ino and Sakura were still competing for Sasuke's attention, which was the perfect way for him to take advantage and motivate her. He fully turned to face her. You might not know this, but Sasuke's the last Uchiha alive who is still loyal to Konoha, and as such, he has to repopulate his clan. You know what that means, right? He gave her a pointed look. A dark blush came over her face, but she nodded. She couldn't believe how Naruto could talk about it without feeling the least bit awkward. She didn't know that he did, but he just hid his awkwardness better than others. Naruto continued, to do it, he will need strong women in the future. It all comes down to this, if you don't get strong enough, he will pick Ino over you and you will be left behind. The desired effect was achieved when he saw a fire light up in her eyes. Yep, she definitely couldn't stand losing to Ino. Oh, he almost forgot. One more thing. The answer to your question, you won't. There is no one to tell you that you are ready. It's a leap of faith. He got up and put some money on the counter. That's all it is, Sakura. A leap of faith, he softly finished. Just before he left, he saw something he had definitely not seen in her eyes ever before. Fierce determination. Unknown to the team, Ayam and Tuchi were quietly listening in on their conversation. By the end of it, Ayam looked amazed at the way Naruto had successfully managed to motivate her. He was born to be a leader. I know it, she thought with a smile. Tuchi was smiling like he was the proudest man in the world. He had been attending to Naruto for years and he always knew that Naruto was destined for great things. After witnessing firsthand Naruto's motivational speech, it only reinforced what he already knew. Naruto, you will become a great, no, the greatest Hokage this village has ever seen. Walking out, he immediately silenced Sasuke, who opened his mouth, no doubt to rant at him for bringing him into this, and motioned him to follow him. They jumped onto the opposite rooftop and crouched. What are we waiting for? Sasuke whispered. Just watch, Naruto said, pointing to the ramen bar. A few moments later, Sakura walked out and Sasuke could definitely see that she was different. Her fangirl was still visible in her eyes, but was now overshadowed by a fierce look of determination. He watched, amazed that she did not even seem to look for him, instead, turning around and heading towards the training grounds. He turned to his blonde comrade, who who was watching Sakura go away with a smile and no small amount of self-satisfaction. "What did you do?" Hell, even his voice was filled with stupefaction. Naruto gave an innocent shrug, the smile still on his face. "Nothing, just pointed her in the direction of success." He left after that, leaving a speechless Sasuke behind. XXXXXXX. Naruto was just roaming around the training grounds, having finished his training 15 minutes ago. He felt really good after motivating Sakura to become stronger today. Just as he was turning to leave, he sensed it. 3 chakra signatures, 200 meters away. One was average, other a bit above average, and the last, which was faintly familiar, only a bit above a civilian's. He had already sent a few clones home to prepare dinner, and since there was still time, why not train his stealth skills a bit? He jogged on his toes, cautious not to make any sound. When he was just 50 meters away, he stopped and made a half-ram seal. A puff of smoke later, a small, light brown fox was standing in his place. Lowering his chakra signature by a significant margin, he moved forward. "This should allow me to get close," he thought as he hit 2 trees away from the chakra signatures. "You heard? The upcoming Chunin exams will have rookies for the first time in 5 years. The fox's eyes narrowed. "I know that voice. It's Rock Lee, the kid I met during one of my morning rounds." "No way. The Jonins must be trying to look good," another voice joined in. This one held confidence, bordering on overconfidence. Lee spoke again. 3 of them are from Kakashi's unit as well, you know. The last voice finally spoke. But unlike the previous 2, this held a sort of arrogance not unlike Sasuke's. "That's interesting." Either way, the girl spoke, who Naruto finally identified as Tenten from the Higurashi weapons shop. "That's quite pitiful for them," the arrogant voice spoke as if he already knew who was going to win. Naruto decided that was enough and turned to go back, but he cursed when he stepped on a twig. He could not even sense, since he would be molding chakra, and alerting them was the last thing he wanted to do. "Don't worry," the arrogant one spoke, "it's just a fox." Naruto inwardly sighed in relief, and ran away and did not turn back into himself until he was out of the training grounds. The thought didn't cross his mind that how did he know that it was only a fox? One thing is for sure. These Chunin exams will definitely be interesting. XXXXXXX. 6 days passed and it was the day of the Chunin exams. Sasuke and Naruto had arrived at the academy, and Naruto could tell. Sasuke was fired up like anything. The only one left to arrive was Sakura. They were simply waiting outside the gates when Sakura arrived. And there was something visibly different about her. She looked like usual, but her posture had a confidence that both of them hadn't seen before. Naruto looked into her eyes and smiled at what he saw. Resolve. Resolve to see this through, and she didn't look the least bit uncertain. "Good morning, Naruto, Sasuke-kun," she greeted. Sasuke, for his part, hid his surprise just barely. Whenever she greeted him, she did like a fangirl. Now, she looked just like a determined kunoichi. "Good morning, Sakura," Naruto greeted with a nod. Sasuke just gave his customary grunt. "Let's stop wasting time in greetings and go," he ordered tartly, striding inside without even waiting for them. Sakura gave an amused look to Naruto, who just shrugged in a way that said, "What can you do?" They caught up to him and ascended the stairs, silently and focused. The sound of a crowd caught their attention and they went to investigate. Upon arriving at the scene, they stared in surprise at the large crowd. What the hell was going on? Then Naruto sensed the genjutsu over the whole corridor and narrowed his eyes. In front of them were 2 guards who looked suspiciously familiar. Naruto narrowed his eyes at them and it suddenly came to him, causing him to resist a face-palm. Who were Izumo and Kotetsu trying to fool with that obvious hunch? Sasuke nudged Sakura. "This is only the 2nd floor, isn't it?" Sakura looked at him in surprise. Sasuke never, ever talked to her so actively. She looked at Naruto, who gave her a thumbs up. She turned to Sasuke and spoke confidently. "Hey, since we've only climbed 2 floors. This is obviously a genjutsu." Sasuke then nodded to himself and started walking to the crowd, mostly to show off by proclaiming that a genjutsu of this caliber does not fool him. But a hand to his shoulder caused him to turn around and glare at Naruto, who was shaking his head. "The people over there still haven't noticed that they are still just on the 2nd floor, he said softly. This is probably a test designed to weed out the weaklings, so let's just slip by, nice and quiet, he suggested. Sasuke found that this was becoming quite frequent. Him going off to do something, Naruto stopping him and giving a suggestion, Sasuke agreeing, albeit grudgingly, that the suggestion was better and following Naruto. Even now, Naruto's suggestion was strategically better. Reducing the competition meant their chance of winning was higher. To be completely honest, Sasuke was jealous of Naruto. He was jealous of his strength, his skills, his natural charisma, the way that leadership seemed to fit with him like a glove, how it came to him so naturally. Obviously, his own desire to be at the top and be leader clashed with Naruto's. He could not stand to remain second best, especially to Naruto of all people. Clenching his fists in his pockets, he nodded and as one, quietly slipped through the crowd and took the stairs to the 3rd floor. As they were heading to 301, a voice came from above them. "Hey, you, the one with the dark eyes. Please wait." They all turned and looked above to see a kid wearing a tight, green jumpsuit and orange leg warmers. His black hair had a bowl-cut style and he had amazingly thick eyebrows. He was looking at Sasuke. Naruto rose an eyebrow at him. "What is Lee playing at?" Lee jumped down to their level and it was only then he recognized Naruto. He gave off a blinding grin. "Naruto-kun. What a youthful surprise to see you here." Sakura and Sasuke gave Naruto mildly horrified looks. They didn't know that Naruto knew this weirdo. As for Naruto, he just took a page from Kakashi's book and gave a lazy wave in a lazy voice. "Yo." It turned out to be the wrong thing to say, as Lee cried out while shaking a fist. "What happened, cool attitude? Your flames of youth seem to have diminished since the last time we met." Naruto shrugged and decided to intervene in case Lee takes off on a tangent. "So Lee, why did you stop us?" Lee suddenly sobered and turned to Sasuke. "Sorry, I got distracted. My name is Rock Lee, and I wish to challenge this year's Prodigy, Uchiha Sasuke, to a fight." Sasuke replied back coldly, "And why should I give you the time?" He gave a once-over and found him lacking any sort of strength whatsoever. He, however, didn't like the way Lee called him a prodigy. A prodigy should stand out of a crowd, and the title felt cheap because Naruto was stronger than him. Lee smiled. "I am the strongest Konohamaru right now. A test for myself, and to see if you're as good as everyone says you are." Sasuke smirked, causing Naruto to sign resignation. Just a mention of a fight was enough to get Sasuke's blood pumping. 10 minutes later, he found himself looking at a beat-up Sasuke and wondered if it was a mistake or did Sasuke deliberately underestimate Lee. Judging from appearance, Lee was nothing special. But apparently, Sasuke had never heard the phrase, "Appearances can be deceiving." Lee had absolutely dominated the fight, even when Sasuke had activated his Sharingan. All throughout the fight, Sasuke had been trying to just find Lee, because he was unbelievably fast. Of course, Naruto had easily followed Lee's movements, because he himself had surpassed that speed with his resistance seals activated at level 11 long ago. He closely observed that even when Sasuke had just begun to react fast enough, he was smashed by Lee's superior taijutsu skills and pure speed. Just when Lee was about to end the fight, it was ended by a talking turtle of all people. "Lee, that technique is forbidden," he yelled at him. Lee bowed his head in apology. "I'm sorry. I got carried away." The turtle glared at Lee, causing him to flinch. But I wasn't planning to use the R-reverse version." "Baka!" the turtle exclaimed, causing Lee to flinch again. "You think that excuse will work? You should know what it means for a shinobi to expose his move." While the turtle was busy reprimanding Lee, Naruto glanced over to see if Sasuke was alright, but he wished he hadn't. Sasuke had a look of absolute loathing on his face as he glared at Lee and the turtle. I lost to that weirdo?" He looked over to Sakura and saw that she was still shocked at the pure speed that Lee displayed. Looking over to Naruto, he resisted the urge to roar in rage. Naruto was looking bored, just as he was before the fight. There was not a single trace of alarm or fear that Sasuke could see. Which meant only one thing: Naruto was certain, absolutely confident that he could take on Lee and win. Just how strong is he? He doesn't look alarmed in the least. That means he knows he is stronger and faster than the weirdo. He knows he could counter Lee's every move, whereas I couldn't even follow that guy. Is Naruto even in the same league as the rest of the genin? How can I, with a Sharingan, still not match up to him? were the thoughts rushing through his head. He hated being weaker than anyone. He turned his attention back to the turtle, who said, "Gai-sensei will take care of your punishment." An explosion of smoke erupted on the turtle's back, and when it cleared, an adult version of Rock Lee was seen standing in a ridiculous pose. "Geez, you guys are the epitome of the springtime of youth." To say Team 7 was freaked out was an understatement. They were shell-shocked at his appearance. Even Naruto was looking a bit alarmed, with Kurama screaming in his mind to make it stop. If Lee were just a few years older, no one would be able to tell the difference between him and Gai. "Lee, you fool!" Gai shouted at him, punching him in the jaw so hard that Lee flew back. Lee quickly recovered, though. Gai then proclaimed, "For breaking the rule and fighting before the exam, you must complete 500 laps around Konoha before sundown." The whole of Team 7 gaped at the absurdity of the challenge, believing it to be nothing more than a joke. However, they were further shocked into disbelief at Lee's reply. "Hey Gai-sensei." Lee's eyes were burning at the challenge. Probably at how much youthful it was, Naruto mused. Naruto decided to intervene before even more weirdness took place. "Excuse me, but don't you think that you should focus on the Chunin exams right now?" Gai-sensei turned to them for the first time, looking a bit sheepish. "Oh, my bad." Turning to Lee, he coughed in his hand and said, "Lee, you will fulfill your punishment after the Chunin exams, got it?" Lee stood at attention. "Hey, Gai-sensei." Gai then turned to the other team. "Ah, so you guys are from Kakashi's team?" Sasuke rose an eyebrow condescendingly. "You know Kakashi?" Gai chuckled as he rubbed his chin. "Kakashi and I are eternal rivals. I am leading currently, with my 50 wins to Kakashi's 49. The whole Team 7 sweat dropped at that. Lee jumped in. "Isn't Gai-sensei the greatest?" Sasuke was studying Gai intensely, looking at the empty space. "Wait, what?" He and Sakura suddenly turned around to face Gai, who had gotten behind them so fast that not even a blur was visible. But Naruto showed no signs of surprise, having followed him with his eyes. Gai had only used low Jonin level speed right now. He knew that Gai had barely put effort in getting that fast to get behind them. While he could do it as well if he took his seals off for now, he would be destroyed in a contest of speed if Gai went full speed. There was only so much speed his 12-year body could go at before reaching a limit. Sasuke was looking at Gai with wide eyes along with Sakura. "This guy. He's definitely faster than Kakashi," he thought with a grimace. Rage filled him once more. "Damn it. How many people are there that I have to surpass to become capable of defeating him? Anyways, you guys should head to the room. Your exam is to begin soon. Good luck." Turning to Lee, he flashed a grin and a thumbs up. "Do your best, Lee. Bask in the springtime of youth." He disappeared after that. Lee began to wrap his bandages up, but just before he left, he turned to Sasuke. "Sasuke-kun, I apologize for lying before. I am not the strongest Konoha, it is my teammate. I entered this exam to defeat him, and you are one of my targets as well. Please prepare yourself, and I wish you all the best." After Lee finally walked away, Naruto carefully observed Sasuke. His fists were clenched tight, along with gritted teeth and a look of frustration and rage on his face. Naruto clenched his own fists and raged in his mind. Who does he think he is? Why does he keep thinking that he's the only one who is strong and the rest are weak? He kept his face carefully neutral as he faced Sasuke. "What's wrong, Sasuke?" He was careful to keep his voice level. He didn't even flinch when Sasuke faced him, a look of barely contained rage on his face. "Shut up. I'll slaughter him next time," he promised. Naruto only rose an eyebrow. "We are in the middle of an exam, which means there is little time. Sorry, no time for you to get better than him. Maybe after the exams, but not now." "And why were you so angry and frustrated before? Is it so hard to accept that there are people of our age who are stronger and faster than you?" Sasuke opened his mouth to tell Naruto to mind his own business, but nothing came out. He realized with a growl that what Naruto had said was true. He was brought up with the teachings from his father that the Uchiha are the greatest, and he learned it all with pride. So it was hard for his pride to accept that there is someone who is stronger, faster than him. Ever since the massacre, he had trained his hardest every day, trying to bridge the power gap between him and him, just so he could have his revenge. He thought that he had at least become stronger than his peers, only to find out how thoroughly outclassed he was among those of his own age. Naruto shook his head. One day, Sasuke's superiority complex is gonna blow up in his face. Sasuke was too proud of himself, believing his power was better than others and no one could match him. But pride always had its downfall, and it didn't look like Sasuke's gonna learn that lesson anytime soon. Anyway, we should get going. We don't want to be late for the exam, Naruto said as he took the lead, with Sakura following him after giving a concerned glance to Sasuke, who followed the last. They reached the room, only to see Kakashi leaning against the wall with his head buried in his porn. Kakashi looked at them and closed his book, putting his hands in his pockets. He gave them a critical look. Sakura decided to come as well. I see. Naruto frowned at his statement. What do you mean by that? His voice held a hard edge now, warning Kakashi that he better not play with the answers right now. Kakashi, for his part, didn't take offense at Naruto's tone at all. Instead, he mentally approved of how Naruto spoke. It was clear that he was in the zone, ready to tackle a challenge. He had taken on a mindset of a serious shinobi now, mentally prepared for the challenges to come. He was also surprised at the lack of uncertainty in Sakura, which he had seen on the day he had given out the Chunin forms. Something had happened in between, but whatever it was, he was glad for it. A mild feeling of disappointment went through him when he saw Sasuke's state. There were light bruises on his face, and he looked like someone had just trampled on his ego. He mentally shook his head. Sasuke was too impulsive when it came to his pride and ego. He could never take any defeat in stride. For all his skills, Sasuke's mix of having both a superiority and an inferiority complex made him, in Kakashi's words, a sore loser. He shook these thoughts off and focused on answering Naruto. You are now, officially, registered to take the exams. To tell you the truth, Chunin exams can only be taken in teams of 3. So you lied that it is up to us whether we want to take part in it or not, Naruto stated, eyes narrowing. Kakashi nodded seriously. I did. I feared that if I hadn't, you two would have forced Sakura to take the exams with you. And if only they both had come here and not you, Sakura, I would have turned them away. He smiled, but I'm glad that you 3 came of your own free will, and as a team. Sakura, unnoticed by Kakashi, gave a small glance to Naruto and smiled. It's all thanks to you, Naruto. You washed away my uncertainty. Kakashi moved out of their way. Go on in, then. Do your best. They opened the door, and were surprised to see the number of genin taking the Chunin exams. And all of them were looking at them. Naruto put on his game face, which was a neutral scowl. He was internally scoffing at the pathetic amount of killing intent coming their way. He looked back to see that Sasuke was unaffected as well. Sakura too, if not for the slight bead of sweat on the side of her face. He turned back, absently wondering if he would see any of his peers. Sasuke-kun? Naruto flinched, and then sighed. Kami, he hated that voice. He turned around just in time to see a blonde missile, Ino hug Sasuke tightly from behind. It's been so long since I have seen you, Sasuke-kun. I miss your dark looks, you know. Sakura spoke in a surprisingly normal tone, but serious nonetheless. Let Sasuke-kun go, Ino pig. Ino glanced at Sakura, mocking her. I am surprised they let you compete, forehead. Sakura gained a tick mark, her voice getting a bit higher. You leave my forehead out of this. Ino just stuck her tongue out at Sakura. Naruto just rolled his eyes at the immature display. Oh. You guys are competing in this stupid test too. Shikamaru's voice came as he approached with Choji. Naruto smirked and lightly commented, I didn't think you had the energy to take this exam, Shika. The said boy sighed. It's troublesome, but Ino threatened us with our lives, so we had to. Finally found you guys. Naruto saw that it was Kiba's voice, who was coming with teammate in tow. He nodded, blushed at the sight of Naruto. Well, it looks like all the rookies are assembled. Shikamaru sighed. Geez, you guys too? Kiba hummed. I wonder how far we will get, now that all of us are assembled. Eh, Sasuke? Sasuke smirked in return. You seem quite confident, Kiba. Kiba boasted. We trained a lot. We won't be losing to you. You guys should be quieter, you know, came a new voice from behind them. They all turned to see a bespectacled teenager with gray hair and a ponytail. He looked almost 17, and was wearing a Konohamaru tie 8. You guys are rookies just out of the academy, right? You shouldn't be fooling around like that, he said. Inu took offense to that. Who the hell are you to tell us that? I'm Yakushi Kabuto. And just take a look around you, he gently said, not seeming to mind her tone at all. All the rookies, except for Naruto and Sasuke, tensed up after looking around. They were the focal point of all the attention, and it wasn't the good kind. The team behind you is from a Megakure no Sato. They have short tempers, he explained. Naruto decided that he had enough of people trying to intimidate him and his team, so he turned the tables. He didn't exude any killing intent, but simply glared with his eyes. He was very much satisfied to see many of them flinch, and why shouldn't they? He hid his father's eyes, and his father sent his enemies running in the opposite direction with just a look. These genin stood no chance. Kabuto-san, was it? Sakura's voice caused him to turn. Yes? Is this your second time taking these exams? No, actually it is my seventh, Kabuto admitted, sheepishly rubbing the back of his head. Wow, you must really suck then. Kiba's brashness surprised no one. Kabuto shrugged, conceding the point, or maybe the exams are just that hard. To help out, I thought I'd share some info on the other participants with my fellow Konoha. He withdrew a thick deck of cards from his weapons pouch. Who do you want to know about? Give me information on Sabaku-no-Gura, Rock Lee and Uzumaki Naruto, Sasuke commanded, desperate for some information on his teammate and the others. The rookies gave him weird looks, but Naruto glared at Sasuke, who glared back. Finally, I get to see just how powerful you really are, Naruto. Kabuto smirked. You already know their names, which makes it less fun. Looking at his cards, he began reading. Sabaku-no-Gura, his team has completed 8 C rank and WoW, a B rank. It says he's come back from each of them without a scratch. A genin doing a B rank is highly unusual, but coming back from one without any injury is just unheard of. This caused all of them to tense up, even Naruto. Next is Rock Lee, Konoha genin with a tremendous skill in Taijutsu. His skills in ninjutsu and genjutsu are nil. He is a member of Team 9 led by Madogai as his sensei. His teammates are Hyuga Neji and Higurashi Tenten. He has completed 42 D ranks and 37 C ranks. He has been a genin for a year more than you guys. Next is Uzumaki Naruto, he said, pulling another card. Though he blinked in surprise when it suddenly disappeared from his hands. Looking up, he saw Naruto holding the card between 2 fingers. Sasuke growled and went to snatch the card from him, but Naruto playfully put it out of reach, though there was a dangerous glint in his eyes. Sorry Sasuke, Kabuto-san, but I don't like my cards to be displayed until the end of the game. He clapped the card between his hands, and when he separated them, only small pieces of the card fell out. His eyes then narrowed as he looked at Kabuto. You really shouldn't give out information like that, Kabuto-san. It may come to bite you back one day. On the inside, he was trying to figure Kabuto out. Just who is this guy? Getting information on Lee wouldn't be so hard, but how did he acquire the mission stats of a foreign 9, who is also a Jinchuriki? When they can only be accessed by the Kazekage and his council. It's obvious that he knows way too much to be a genin. And why am I getting the feeling of snakes from this guy? I have to inform Gigi of this somehow. That type of information opens up the possibility that he is a spy. Kabuto held his hands up in surrender. I meant no harm, Naruto-kun. I just like to gather information is all. Naruto didn't look convinced but gave it a rest. Kabuto thought, guess I won't be making his job any harder. His master would be so disappointed. Naruto's senses spiked and he caught a movement in the corner of his eyes. He saw a ninja with a headband having a musical note flying through the air, throwing 2 kunai into the floor in front of Kabuto, who jumped back just in time for another one with the same headband, but had his head covered in bandages, to appear in front of him and taking a swing at Kabuto. Kabuto dodged, smirking, but his glasses suddenly shattered and he collapsed onto his knees, throwing up. 3-9, 2 boys and 1 girl, stood in front of Kabuto, radiating killing intent. Pathetic. The bandaged one scoffed. Aren't you supposed to be a 4-year-old veteran? Meanwhile, Naruto was trying to figure out what just happened. If nothing hit Kabuto, why did his glasses shatter and why the hell did he throw up? Was it pressurized air? Kurama scowled and spoke from within. Think Naruto. What is the symbol on his Hokage 8? Naruto frowned. It's a musical note. Kurama prompted him further. Music is a form of sound, and how does sound travel? Naruto replied, through the medium of air. Oh, he smirked. He manipulated the sound waves to target the ear and throw off his balance. He shook his head. Foolish guy. He just gave away his main attack. Naruto turned to see the spiky-haired ninja talking. Write this down on your cards. 3 Otogakure ninjas, definite future Chunin. An explosion of smoke went down in front of the class and a voice was heard. When the smoke cleared, there was a large man wearing a black trench coat, black fingerless gloves and a bandana was standing. His intimidating stature and harsh tone that followed ensured that his words were heeded quickly. That is Morino Ibuki, if I'm not wrong. Konoha's top interrogator alongside Yamanaka and Oichi and Anko Sensei's superior, Naruto speculated. Alright you maggots. Shut the hell up and sit down in your assigned seats. The first part of the exam will begin now. Any fighting will lead straight to disqualification. Pointing to the Otogakure ninjas, he said, you better stop doing that if you don't want to fail before even the exam starts. He watched as everyone went to their assigned seats. Once everyone was settled, he began explaining the exam. This is an exam in which you start off with 10 points. There are 2 rules to this exam. The first rule, this is a team test. Whether you pass or not will be determined by the combined score of your teammates. Second rule, anyone caught doing any sneaky activities, namely cheating, he smiled in a sinister way that sent shivers down many people's spines, will have 2 points taken off for every offense. You have 45 minutes. Begin. The sound of papers turning sounded for a brief moment. Naruto first inspected where his teammates were seated. To his disappointment, they were seated quite far. Turning his eyes on the test, he raised an eyebrow in disbelief. What type of questions are these? They are no genin level, that's for sure. Which means they want the genin to cheat. This exam is testing our information gathering. He gave an impressed smirk at that, but then frowned. I may have photographic memory, but it defeats the whole purpose of this test if I write what I know. What to do now? He scanned the room, looking for someone who was confidently filling out the answers at a high speed. He smirked when he saw one sitting in the column to his left, 2 rows above him. Got him. Now I just have to figure out how to learn his answers. Or maybe I can just switch our tests. He pondered for over 2 minutes on what to do, watching his peers cheat. Sasuke was copying answers with his Sharingan. Sakura was writing on her own since she knew the answers. Tenten had cleverly altered the ceiling flap to reflect someone's answers. Hinata was using her Byakugan. Shino was using his bugs to cheat. Kiba had Akamaru on top of his head, barking his answers to him. Shikamaru did not need to cheat, as he was already smart enough. Got it. First, he would have to scope out the field. He spent the next 5 minutes watching the invigilators walk, trying to find a pattern. Finally, he found a loophole. There were 4 columns of students, with all the columns separated. The first invigilator between the first 2 columns walked with the invigilator between the last 2. Ibuki walked in the center of the second and third columns, but he always moved opposite to the other 2 invigilators. So, there was a point where all 3 of them were in a row and then they went in the opposite direction of each other. There was a 3-second interval during which none of them were facing him. After that interval, the 3 of them would face the class from the respective ends. Which means, he had 3 seconds to make his plan work. Second, know the number of the desk from which he was going to cheat. The test paper didn't have a space to write their names, but a space where they had to write their desk number. So, he deduced that teams will be identified from the number of the desk they were sitting on. Every team had been given specific seats according to the seating plan next to the board. So when Ibuki comes across the papers from the desk numbers 8, 21 and 27, he would know he was looking at the papers of Team 7 according to the seating plan. Now that he knew what he needed to know, it was time to act. Counting from now, he discreetly pulled out 2 smoke bombs during the first interval under the pretense of scratching his back. Maybe it was a bit overkill, but he needed to remain unseen. He waited till the guy was finished writing. 5th interval was when shit hit the fan. As soon as the back of the invigilators were turned to him, he wasted no time and threw the smoke bombs onto the floor, one on the right and one on the left. Roars of anger and panic could be heard throughout the classroom as no one could see their tests. Windows were opened to let the smoke out, and once it was cleared, several of them looked confused as nothing had happened to their tests. Naruto, however, was calmly pretending to keep writing on the sheet on which answers were already filled out. The guy whose sheet he stole had a panicked look on his face when he saw that the sheet in front of him had all the wrong answers written down. There was even a mocking note that said "better luck next time." The worst thing was that the sheet in front of him had his desk number written on it. There wasn't enough time to erase and write the correct answers all over again. Yeah, Naruto was not above such petty things from time to time. Naruto calmly erased the desk number on the sheet he stole and wrote his own down. What had happened was when the smoke spread, Naruto had quickly created a shadow clone that had instantly transformed into a finger-sized version of himself. The clone had taken a hold of his sheet and substituted with the sheet of the guy Naruto had decided to cheat from. By the time smoke cleared, Naruto had already finished his job. Hibiki was slightly irritated at the ruckus caused. He held his hand up for silence. Anyone who has lost their sheet might as well get out with your team. Surprisingly, none of them moved to get up. Hibiki deduced that whoever had done that was only looking out for himself. Though I'm interested in learning just who exactly did that, he thought as his eyes swept around the room. His eyes looked at Naruto, who was simply leaned back in his chair, eyes up at the ceiling, and an uncaring look on his face. His eyes narrowed the tiniest bit in suspicion. Naruto was well known for his successful pranks all around the village. Uzumaki Naruto. He doesn't look bothered in the least. He could be the one. His face edged back into his neutral expression. Then again, he hasn't looked the least bit bothered since the beginning of this test. And just like that, he lifted his suspicion off Naruto, continuing to watch the class closely. Uzumaki Pranking Code of Conduct, Rule 2, in the aftermath of a prank, throw suspicion off yourself in any way possible. At the end of 35 minutes, Hibiki looked at the clock on the wall and nodded to himself. He turned his head to the opened door, through which Kakuro, who had gone through the bathroom, entered. "Was your doll playing any beneficial?" he asked, smirking. The puppet user flinched, surprised he had been caught. "Go sit down," he ordered Kakuro. After he was seated, Hibiki started emitting a sadistic aura. "Time up. You now have a choice presented to you, to either take the 10th question, or not to take it," he stated, much to the confusion of the genin. "Choose." A familiar voice shouted from the back. Naruto turned to see Temari, whose eyes displayed confused anger. "What happens if we choose not to?" At that point, Naruto simply stopped caring what Hibiki said. He just kept watching Temari, a small, dreamy smile on his face. Temari caught his gaze and blushed, averting her face and trying to quell the growing blush. "Why is he staring at me like that?" Hibiki chuckled darkly. "If you choose not to, your points will be reduced to 0. You'll be failed along with your teammate." Everyone started to shout in protest, but a sudden bout of killing intent from Hibiki silenced them. "Also, if you choose to take it and answer incorrectly, you will lose the right to ever participate in the future Chunin exams." Kiba hollered in anger. "What kind of a rule is that? Genin from before were still able to retake the Chunin exams, so why is this exam any different?" Hibiki released another dark chuckle. "The one gave out when he was being extremely sadistic, the other genin didn't have me as the proctor. My test, my rules. Choose, I haven't got all day." Naruto observed that Hibiki had all the genin quivering now. He waited until several teams had quit to make his move. Lesser the competition, the better their chances, after all. Giving a wink to Temari, whose blush darkened to cover her entire face, he turned around and stood up, all the playfulness from earlier when he was flirting with Temari vanishing from his face. Hibiki stared at the blonde, along with all the others, whose face was set in dead seriousness. His eyelids were half drooped, but he still looked entirely serious. "I don't care what happens at all. I have a dream of becoming a Hokage that no one can stop me from achieving. I'll do it even if I have to stay a genin to do so. Do your worst, but know this," he pointed a finger at Hibiki without any fear, "rank means nothing to me, at all." Everyone was watching Naruto with disbelief, who never once broke eye contact with Hibiki. Hibiki himself was thrown off by the sheer conviction displayed in the voice and eyes of a 12-year-old. Sakura was in awe of Naruto's declaration. Sasuke gave a sigh of relief, for he thought Naruto was going to quit. Each of the rookies, except for one or two, held a newfound respect for Naruto. The whole room was silent, and everyone that remained had caught every word. And the results were staggering. Ibiki smirked. Yeah, he's interesting. He wiped out everyone's uncertainty. Looking around the room, he counted how many were remaining. 57, huh? There are more left than I expected. There's no point in waiting anymore. Congratulations, you all pass. Ibiki declared, and hid to fight the smile that threatened to appear on his face at the beflaement of as well as the disbelief of the genin. But what about the 10th question? A genin from AIM demanded to know. That was the 10th question. It was a question to test your will and fortitude. As a Chunin, you'll be forced to take tough decisions, and no one needs weak-willed Chunin leading their forces to their deaths. By asking this question, you've shown me your determination and willingness to do the best for your villages, even with handicaps. He explained. Temari spoke once again, so the other questions were for nothing. And once again, she blushed when Naruto turned to stare at her with a smile. No, the test was for info gathering. And to see how much balls you all had, he answered, looking in the direction of Naruto, who turned back and gave a graceful shrug. This marks the end of the first phase of the Chunin selection exams. I wish you luck for the next phase, Ibiki smiled, which was surprisingly pleasant and not all that disturbing. Before he could say anything else, he caught something from the corner of his eyes and stepped back just in time for a ball of cloth to come crashing through the window. Two kunai flew out of the cloth and stuck to the ceiling, unfurling the cloth, revealing a very familiar purple-haired woman wearing a brown trench coat. On the cloth it was written, Second Exam Proctor Mitarashi Anko. You guys. This is no time to be happy. She exclaimed. I am the proctor for the second test, Mitarashi Anko. The real exam starts now. Are you ready? She shouted and pumped her fist into the air. Ibiki came from behind the cloth. Grasp the atmosphere, will you? Anko blushed at his deadpan. Naruto simply sat down and crossed his arms, fondly smiling at her. It had been a while since he saw his sensei and to be honest, he missed her eccentricities. Anko counted the number of genin left and raised an eyebrow. 57? Ibiki, you let 19 team pass. You let them off too easy. She scoffed. Ibiki shrugged. This time, we have quite an interesting bunch. Anko scoffed and was about to smirk back when a familiar mop of blonde hair caught her eye. She smiled proudly when she saw Naruto sitting in the room, fondly smiling at her. As soon as she made eye contact, that smile turned into a smirk and he winked at her. Anko grinned savagely, now that she knew that her best and only student was in the exams. You may be right, Ibiki, she said. However, I'll cut those numbers in half in the second test. That, coupled with her savage grin, was enough to make everyone sweat a little. Naruto just shook his head. His sensei was as intimidating as ever. I will explain the details tomorrow. We will go to another place, so ask your Jonin sensei about where to go and the time. That is all. Dismissed. Everyone stood up to leave, while Anko just smirked and walked in the direction of her former student. Naruto stood up as well, standing just 4 inches short of Anko's height. He waved his teammates away, who were looking curiously, telling them he will catch up later. What's up, Brett? I didn't know that you were going to be in this exam. Naruto shrugged, putting his hands in his pockets. Even we didn't know until only a week ago, Anko-sensei. Ibiki raised an eyebrow, coming to stand with them. Sensei? So this is the brat Hokage-sama assigned to you? Naruto smiled, his whites showing. Uzumaki Naruto, pleased to meet you. Anko-sensei talked about you occasionally, Ibiki-san. You really did frighten all the genin to death. Ibiki smirked while Anko scoffed. If he really had, there wouldn't be 19 teams left. Ibiki jerked a thumb towards Naruto. You should thank him for that. Brat gave a speech that wiped all the fear I put into them. Anko puffed up proudly, never minding Ibiki's failure. Of course he did. He is my student after all. He was born to be a leader. Naruto smiled, but turned serious, though I do have a concern to raise. His serious tone was enough to catch their attention. What is it, Naruto? Anko asked with a frown. Naruto said, it about the genin named Yakushi Kabuto. He seemed to have some sort of information cards that had info, mainly the mission steps and their strengths and weaknesses, on all the genin present. I could believe it if he only had info on the genin of Konoha, but he also had it on the son of Nine, Gaara. Something that should only be known by the Hokage and his council. He explained all his observations and conclusions to them. Ibiki and Anko paid serious attention to this, and by the end of his explanation, both were frowning heavily. "This is not good," Anko commented. Ibiki nodded, a hard look on his face. "If what you say is true, we might have a spy in our midst. And having information like that means he has likely been a spy for years. Who knows what kind of information he has now?" Naruto frowned. "Even I'm not that sure. As I said, my own observations led me to this conclusion. Regardless of whether he is a spy or not, such matters have to be investigated for that sort of possibility, don't they?" Anko nodded. "That is true. This matter will be taken to the Hokage immediately. Ibiki." Ibiki turned on Anko, an incredulous look on his face. "You can't order your superior, you know that, right?" Anko shrugged, putting an arm around Naruto's shoulders, not caring in the least that his face was right next to her. Assets. "I know, but in the light that my student is in the Chunin exams, it is his duty to treat me to dango. Let's go, brat." She started walking, not letting go of Naruto, who was struggling to get out of her embrace. Ibiki smiled and shook his head, muttering, "Just this time, I'll let this go." As Naruto stared at the number of dango sticks in front of him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia. Back when he was still being trained by Anko-sensei, he had noticed her obsession. More like an addiction, to dango. She was never seen by him without dango, or a dango stick dangling between her teeth. Whenever she was in a good mood, she would always treat him to dango. It was always a very touching gesture for him, so he didn't have the heart to tell her that he preferred the Chiraku ramen. They had been on the dango stand for over 2 hours now, and Naruto had told her everything that had happened to him ever since he became a student of Kakashi. He was careful to leave sensitive parts out, such as the massacre on the bridge, or that he knew the famous jutsu of the Yondain. Anko whistled when he was finished. "Wow, you sure haven't been bored after you became a team member, have you?" Naruto shrugged. "Not if you count doing D-rank missions as exciting. I'll pick a C-rank or training over them any day." He ruthlessly pushed away the memories of repeatedly catching Tora. He would try his utmost to become a Chunin, if only to escape from doing that mission again. Anko hummed, not saying anything else. She avoided any topic that was related to Orochimaru. Naruto took a deep breath and exhaled, slowly getting up. "Well, it was nice catching up with you, sensei, but I gotta rest for tomorrow. I would want to be fully rested for the exam of which you are the proctor of," he said, tweaking between his teeth with the dango stick. Anko also got up, grinning savagely. "Damn straight. I better not see you losing in this phase. You got that, Naruto?" Naruto smiled wide and gave a thumbs up, loud and clear. Anko turned to leave, but seemed to remember something and turned around. "Oh, almost forgot to tell you. Come to the training ground 34 tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Naruto tilted his head. "Wouldn't this be considered cheating on my part to receive information from the proctor, sensei?" Anko smiled and shook her head. "This is the information your team sensei would be telling you. I'm just saving you the trouble of finding your team or Kakashi. All the best, kid." She vanished in a swirl of leaves. Naruto nodded to himself and turned around, heading towards Ichiraku. He felt quite good today in the exam, so celebration was required. Dango was good and all, but it wasn't dinner. Inside his mind, Kurama scoffed, muttering about pathetic excuses to eat unhealthy food. As Naruto neared the ramen stand, he saw something that caused his heart to skip a beat. Temari was roaming on the street, apparently taking in the sights. The best fact was that she was on her own. None of her brothers were with her, not even Gaara. He didn't know why, but suddenly his palms started to feel sweaty and his heartbeat seemed to increase. This was his perfect chance of spending some time with her. "Go for it, brat," came Kurama's encouraging voice. Wow, he and him were on the same page. His steps automatically began to take him in her direction. Every step felt like he was going too slow, but at the same time, he was going too fast. He had no idea on how to approach her or what to say, but at the same time he wanted her to spend time with him, to enjoy spending time with him. "Oi, Naruto. You will not stutter in front of a mere girl. You are my Jinchuriki and you won't embarrass me." Naruto wanted to tell him that she didn't even know that he was a Jinchuriki. And how the hell did that fact relate to what he was about to do? He barely kept himself from voicing his thoughts to the fox inside him, forgetting that Kurama could easily read his thoughts. Kurama scoffed and refrained from speaking. He will see how Naruto handles this without making himself look like a fool. It happened too quickly, but he was standing behind her. She seemed to be unaware that he was standing directly behind her. Stealing up and swallowing up his nervousness, he tapped her shoulder. Temari finally relaxed after exiting the hotel where she and her brothers were staying. She had known that after their training, she was going to get bored because she had nothing to do. After almost half an hour of arguing, she was able to convince Kankuro to let her leave the hotel. Gato really didn't care much about what she did, and it was one thing she was grateful for. Becky didn't protest much once she told him that she would be able to scout the important locations in this village. So here she was, wandering the streets and taking in the sights. She had to admit, Konoha was beautiful. All the greenery in the village made it seem like the village actually pulsed with life. The weather here was very pleasant as well, though that could be attributed to the greenery. As she aimlessly wandered, her thoughts turned to the attractive blonde from before. Uzumaki Naruto, she tested the word on her lips, her mouth unconsciously turning into a smile. He was certainly attractive, more so than any boy she had seen of her age. He was also quite fearless and charismatic as well, if what he did when the 10th question was asked is anything to go by. That certainly earned him points in her book. She didn't know if he realized it or not, but he had erased all traces of doubts the intimidating examiner had put into them, including her. Something inside her told her that he knew. Her hormones seemed to make their presence known, as she began to imagine what he looked like without his shirt and jacket on. Her cheeks burned as she realized what she was thinking, and rapidly shook her head to clear it of any more thoughts like those. Why am I thinking such things? I don't even know him. Then her thoughts did a complete 180 once more. Although, I wouldn't mind to get to know him through a date or two. She flushed again, though this time she had a smile and didn't try to shake it off. So lost in her thoughts she was, that she startled a bit when her shoulder was tapped. Mentally cursing herself for getting caught off guard, she turned to see who had tapped her and got frozen in place when she saw the subject of her thoughts right in front of her. Naruto became a bit confused when Temari turned around and suddenly froze. Guess she wasn't expecting to meet me, he thought before waving a hand in front of her eyes. Temari-san, are you alright? His voice snapped her back into the present. She saw him looking at her, a curious expression on his face. Regaining control of herself, she smiled and greeted back, I'm alright Uzumaki-san. I just wasn't expecting to see you here. She giggled a bit at the sour look that he made, please don't call me that. Naruto will do just fine. She returned an easy smile, then you must call me Temari. Being called like that by someone of my age make me feel old. Naruto didn't know how he was speaking without thinking, that just won't do now, will it? I wouldn't want to make a pretty lady such as yourself feel old, he returned her easy smile. Temari felt her face go warm at his response. Not wanting to be looking embarrassed, she folded her arms and turned her face away, a smile tugging at her lips. Flatterer, she scoffed softly. Naruto internally grinned. This wasn't hard at all. He didn't have to pretend to be someone he wasn't. He would be thinking upon what to say if he was. The lines and responses just instinctively came to him. Temari changed the topic. So, what are you doing here, Naruto? Naruto put his hands in his jacket pockets. I am actually on my way to have dinner after talking with my sensei. He then asked a bit hesitantly, would you like to join me? Temari barely kept from choking on air, but couldn't prevent her eyes from going wide. What? Naruto then discovered that repeating his question was exponentially harder, but he managed it without stuttering. I said, would you like to join me for dinner? The smile on his face would have seemed natural to anyone if it wasn't for a drop of sweat rolling down the side of his face. Temari forced her stopped mind to kickstart. She could not believe it. Just a short while ago she was thinking about going on a date with Naruto. And not even 10 minutes later he was asking her out. She regained her wits and asked, stuttering, are you asking me out on a date? Oh, and her beet red face wasn't helping her at all. She was hoping though, that the answer would be yes. She might get to know him a bit better. Naruto himself felt his face go warm a bit, but he just rolled with it. Shrugging in what he dearly hoped was a natural manner, he said with a smooth smile, "If you want it to be, sure. Let's go with that." Temari, saying Naruto relaxed, forced herself to relax as well. Crossing her arms, she smirked, "So, where are you taking me, Naruto?" Naruto smirked in return, "You haven't been to the Ichiraku Ramen, have you?" 5 minutes later, they were walking in the direction. Naruto was quickly discovering the awkwardness of the silence between them. To make it go away, he picked a topic that both of them could safely converse about without giving away their secrets. "So, what's the Shinobi Academy in Sunny like?" And so, the silence was broken and conversation picked off from there. Temari was glad to find out how easy it was to converse with Naruto. His seemingly bored and different attitude, in her eyes, was perfectly suited to him. His tone was very friendly, and to her pleasant surprise, she found herself enjoying just talking to him. "And we have arrived," Naruto announced. Temari looked up to see a small, unassuming ramen shop. It was more of a bar than a shop. "Quite simplistic, this place is," she commented. Naruto smirked and turned to her, "Don't knock it until you've tried it." "Yo, Tsuchiya-san." A middle-aged man turned around, smiling when he saw his favorite customer. Naruto. Temari guessed that Naruto had to be very familiar with him to call him that. The man named Tucci then spotted Temari standing beside Naruto and his smile widened. "Oh, and who is this lady friend of yours? A girlfriend on a date?" Tucci suppressed his chuckles as both the children turned red, the girl more than Naruto. Naruto opened his mouth to speak when Ayame came out of the back, wiping her hands. "Naruto-kun? Who are you? And who is this girl beside you?" she asked a bit bewildered. Naruto smiled, his blush slowly disappearing. "This is Sabaku no Temari. She is a genin from Sana, here to take part in the Chunin exams. As to answer your question, Asan, she's not my girlfriend, but we are definitely on a date," he said the last part while turning to Temari and winking, making the sandy blonde redder than she already was, and cursed Naruto in her head for being so charming. Tucci finally let out his chuckles while Ayame happily sighed. Tucci asked Naruto, "And you brought your first date to my stand? I'm really honored, Naruto." Naruto shook his head as he motioned for Temari to take a seat. He sat beside her and grinned, "Why wouldn't I? Your ramen's awesome." Turning to Temari, he smiled, "What will you have, Temari?" Temari frowned a bit in thought and answered after a moment, "I'll have a shio ramen, please." Naruto turned and simply said, "I'll have my usual, Asan." While the ramen was being prepared, he discreetly checked Temari out of the corner of his eye. Her posture was full of confidence, and from what he could see, there wasn't a single speck of a fangirl in her. She was indeed a serious kunoichi. Glancing at her legs, he noted with appreciation the toned, smooth calf muscles underneath the fishnet. His gaze then snapped upwards to a place that occupies the minds of all teenage boys. Her chest was actually quite developed for her age. If only her top were a bit lower. Temari was steadily turning redder and redder as she spotted Naruto checking her out. She did not miss the appreciation in his eyes as he checked out her legs and chest. Her embarrassment finally toppled off the edge, and she turned to him with a red face and furious eyes. "What are you doing?" She expected him to blush and splutter and fruitlessly try to excuse himself. To her surprise, he did not even blush a little bit. Instead, he smirked and returned a question of his own. "What do you think I'm doing?" Their orders arrived, and as Naruto broke his chopsticks, he answered his own question. "I'm checking you out. In both the ways." Temari's embarrassment turned to confusion at his blunt answer. Taking a bite of her own ramen, she barely refrained from gasping in pleasure. It was delicious. As if the food was from heaven itself. Sana had nothing as tasty as this. She heard a chuckle and she opened her eyes to find Naruto staring at her with amusement. Turning a bit red, she scowled and asked, "What's so funny?" His reply was quick, the reaction of everyone who tries the ramen of this stall for the very first time. He chuckled as she swiped at his arm for embarrassing her. She then addressed his previous statement, "What did you mean when you were checking me out in both the ways?" Naruto sneaked a glance in front of him and sighed exasperatedly at seeing Ayame and Tucci trying to eavesdrop not so subtly. He loudly cleared his throat, causing the two to turn away and return to their work, whistling innocently. He then turned to Temari, who had a faint look of amusement on her face. Well, the first point of view is that of a shinobi. You are my competitor, which makes it my duty as a shinobi to gather as much information I can about you, he explained, getting a smirk from her. Oh, and what have you learned? Naruto gulped down the last of his ramen and said, well, the only thing that I have come up with is that you have wind release, indicated by the large fan on your back, which you likely use to augment your jutsus. The size of your fan is also an indicator of your preferred type of jutsus. You like to use Futon on a large scale to overwhelm your opponents. He then thought for a bit and added, the size of your fan is an indicator of another thing. That thing is not easy to carry by any means, so your body has to be physically very strong. Especially your upper body, considering the strength required to swing it at a force to generate torrents of wind. Temari was getting bowled over at how spot on his observation was. She didn't even know it was possible for a complete stranger to learn the full set of anyone's abilities with just one glance. One thing was for sure, Naruto was extremely intelligent and observational. She didn't know anyone of her age who had analytical skills of this caliber. Naruto was turning out to be a very dangerous opponent, now that she thought about it. Finishing his soup, he smacked his lips and turned to face her, the smile never leaving his face. Of course, to everyone it's blatantly obvious that you prefer using your fan's entire genjutsu. But you must have a good grasp of taijutsu, if not genjutsu, considering the fact that children of Hokages have a certain standard to live up to. I'm totally guessing this, but you really don't seem the type to use genjutsu. Temari was at a loss of words. No genin should have analytical skills like the ones Naruto was displaying. Everything he had stated until now was fully true. Something in the last statement caused her to ask a question, but her voice held all. Wait, you mean everything you've just said was based on pure observation except for the last statement? Naruto rested his elbow on the counter and smirked, nodding. Observation and the conclusion that I can derive from those observations. Of course, to derive those conclusions, I have to know my facts so I can suit my theories to them. Temari looked at her empty bowl, muttering so low that Naruto almost didn't catch it. You're really good at that. Naruto grinned, I better be. I have been practicing that for a while now. And what's the second view? Naruto's tone turned purely innocent. Oh, you know, how boys check out hot girls. That earned him a swipe to his shoulder, but there was no heat behind it and the twitching corners of her mouth gave her away. Paying for both of them, despite Temari's protests, he bid the father and daughter good night and they both left. I have to say, this date wasn't half bad, she smirked while walking alongside him. He was escorting her back to her hotel. She had to admit, it was incredibly cute of him. Naruto nodded, putting his hands in his pockets. I have to agree on that. For a date in the middle of Chunin exams, it wasn't bad at all. They talked a bit more and when they finally reached her hotel, Temari turned to Naruto and smiled genuinely. Thank you for the date, Naruto. It was really fun, not to mention the great food. Much to her surprise, Naruto actually looked embarrassed at the praise. He rubbed the back of his head with a sheepish look. Oh, you're embarrassing me. Then he smiled back at her. Seriously though, I too had fun going on a date with you. An awkward silence descended upon them again as neither knew how to properly say goodbye. Chuck it, Naruto decided. In a move that surprised Temari, he leaned forwards and pressed a light peck to her cheek, just near the corner of her mouth. Good night, he muttered before vanishing. He did it so fast that it did not even register to Temari when he left, and how he had left. She just kept staring off into space, a blank look on her face. When she did recover, a massive blush appeared on her face as she smiled and rubbed the corner of her mouth where he had kissed. She wanted to be angry that he had kissed her without her consent, but it was a very sweet gesture and not to mention, the perfect end to their date. He is bold, that's for sure, she thought before going up to her room, a happy and dreamy smile on her face. She wouldn't mind another date with him. XXXXXXX. Naruto had, for the first time in a long time, a sleep filled with dreams that were actually pleasant. He and Temari were on a beach, with Temari wearing some really skimpy bikini. He was this close to kissing her when his body alarm rang and woke him up. He rarely ever groaned while waking up, because that dream was close to reaching the best part. Then again, you rarely ever get to see the best part in those type of dreams, he thought wistfully. Getting out of the bed, he proceeded to do his morning rituals and head onto the roof. He needed his mind to be in a state of hyper-focus. He could not afford any distractions today. Creating a shadow clone to restock his equipment and make breakfast, he flipped onto the roof and sat down in a meditative state. For an hour, he proceeded to calm down and focus his mind on a single objective: to succeed. He mentally went through every piece of information he had read and come up with over the years, every tactic, strategy, everything. When he opened his eyes, all the grogginess was gone, replaced by intense focus and determination. He proceeded to review the memories that suddenly came from his dispelled clone. He noted satisfactorily how both of his hip pouches and thigh holster were stocked. Both pouches were stocked with ample kunai, shuriken, explosive tags, both the normal and tandem explosive tags, flash tags, ninja wire, soldier pills and sealing scrolls, both storage and blank. Tying his spiky hair back neatly, he finished dressing up and sat down for breakfast his clone had prepared for him. He swiftly finished his breakfast and washed his plate. Looking up at the clock, he saw that he had half an hour to the exam. Time to leave, he decided. After closing the door to his apartment, he activated the security seals and left. He walked at a comfortable pace to the training ground 34. Upon arriving, he saw that the genin were still assembling. Naruto. The call made him turn, spotting his two teammates coming. Sasuke and Sakura looked determined more than ever. He waved back. 10 minutes after they had all assembled, a burst of smoke in front of the crowd revealed Anko in all her glory. Look sharp, greenies. Welcome to Training Ground 44, otherwise known as the Forest of Death. She introduced with a sinister flair mixed with dramatics. She had her trademark, bloodthirsty showing, making some of them sweat and the rest feel anxious. For the second part of the exam, the objective is to retrieve and protect. But first, you all are going to sign these papers if you want to take part in this portion of the exam, she said, waving a bunch of papers in her hand. As they were handed the papers, Naruto raised an eyebrow at the large letters form of consent printed on top. He quickly read it and signed it, just in time to heat a genin across the group call out. What do we need to sign these for? We obviously have to take the exams. Anko easily dismissed the statement and explained with a breezy smile, oh, that's your agreement to accept all the risks in the forest, so your respective villages don't blame me and by extension, Konoha for all your deaths, get it? Next to him, Sakura shivered at the words, but when he looked up she had signed the form and looked forward with a steady gaze. Alright, listen up or you're going to die before even reaching the halfway mark. One member of each team will take the forms to the row of tents over there, where the forms will be exchanged for a scroll. Some will get a heaven, some will get an earth scroll. You need both, and you need to get both of them to the tower in the middle of the forest in order to pass, she explained. Somehow, her tone turned even more serious after that. Of course, you also need all your teammates to pass upon arrival. You must also not open the scrolls until you get there, she glared at everyone gathered, daring them to disagree with her. Ino raised her hand. What happens if we open them in the forest? Anko smirked, something unpleasant. For you and your team. Naruto gave his form to Sasuke, who also took Sakura's form and went over to get a scroll for them. As he walked away, Naruto decided to scope out the competition. And nearly choked upon sensing the massive chakra signature some distance away. It was easily as big as his own, perhaps even bigger, not to mention unusually potent. And he almost retched at how much malice it contained. Zabuza did not come even remotely close to what he was sensing now. Gaara, but only perhaps. Discreetly, he gazed in its direction from his peripherals and found out who it was. It was a kunoichi from Kusa, and she was gazing in their direction with a strange look on her face. Naruto immediately averted his eyes and analyzed what he knew. Okay, that was no ordinary chakra signature. No genin can have a chakra pool that large, not to mention it is simply impossible for an average genin to let out such a malicious feeling from their chakra. Her chakra though. We will have to be extremely careful of how we proceed, he thought as Sasuke came back with the Heaven Scroll. Sakura jolted with realization, this test is designed to cut our numbers in half, only half of us can go to the next round. You're right. Pinky. We can't have weaklings being Chunin, so we gotta weed out. Now that everyone has a scroll, you also have a time limit 5 days only. If you run out of time, try again next year. Chaoji looked very upset. What will we do for food? The forest is full of food. Giant, juicy bugs and large predators that will eat you first if you don't eat them. Anko absently waved her hand. Poor Chouji looked ready to cry. Can't we quit? Shikamaru asked, wincing as Ino hit the back of his head. Anko scowled. Hell no. You think you can just quit in the middle of a mission? You want to quit? Hurry up and die. Line up at the gates and be ready, she shouted, pointing towards the gates surrounding the forest. As Team 7 walked up to the gates, Naruto put his hands around his teammates' necks and pulled them close. Sasuke grunted at the sudden action. Sakura almost shrieked, Naruto. Look, stay quiet, his harsh whisper shut her up. Even Sasuke perked up. Naruto was being unusually serious. Listen, don't look openly but see the Kusa kunoichi. He didn't wait for them to look. First things first, if you see her, run or fly. I don't care what you do, but do whatever you can to get the fuck away from her. There's no way she is a genin. Same goes for the team of Sana. You see that redhead, you run away, he emphasized, looking directly at Sasuke, a storm blowing in his eyes. Sasuke would have normally disregarded Naruto's words, but the urgency and unusual harshness with which he said caused to have second thoughts. He trusted Naruto's abilities as a censor, so if he was saying something like this so seriously, he would not question it. Naruto saw Sasuke silently nod and turned to Sakura for the same. She looked shaken, but gave a nod as well. As they faced the gates, Naruto turned to look around one last time. He caught Shikamaru's serious look, who turned away and concentrated on his own entrance. He caught Temari's eye, who to his surprise, did not blush, but give him a nod for best of luck. He returned it with one of his own. He saw Anko looking at him with a grin. Holding up a thumbs up, she mouthed all the best, before she prepared to give the signal. Contestants ready. Go. She shouted in a giddy voice as all the gates opened simultaneously. All the genin shot in with the intent to win. Team 7 took up a three-point formation, with Naruto in the front and Sasuke and Sakura in the behind. The two of them acknowledged Naruto's sensing abilities, so this way, Naruto would be the first to sense something. We should really come up with a working plan for the duration of this test, Naruto said as he flipped over a branch. Fine, down there in the clearing, Sasuke ordered, and they descended to the clearing he spoke of, hidden behind a log. Let's make this quick, because the air is quickly becoming saturated with our opponent's smells, Naruto commented, sniffing around with his nose. Sasuke spoke up, my plan is simple, find and ambush a weaker team for their Earth Scroll and hightail it to the tower. We take breaks sparingly, even at night. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the last point, even at night. Sasuke tilted his head, I was counting on your superior night vision. Naruto acknowledged his point, while that is good and all, we would have to stick to the ground for you two to avoid face planting into a branch. I can also see a weakness to this plan though. While being on the ground gives us room to run, we would be more vulnerable to attacks from those who can use Earth Jutsu, not to mention other teams who might possibly follow a similar plan, he speculated. Sasuke blinked at how quick Naruto was able to point out the faults in his plan. He was about to suggest something else when Naruto spoke again, but we will follow it, since I can't think of anything better right now. But you are forgetting something, Sasuke. What is it? Naruto smirked, we have a great opportunity to use my shadow clones to their full advantage. I can look for Earth Scrolls with them, but we would have to find a safe place to wait. Once we get both the scrolls, I can make up the decoys and divide them between me and Sakura, while you take the decoys. Sasuke thought about it for a moment, black eyes flickering to the ground before looking up directly into the blonde's eyes. Sounds good, Uzumaki. But where can we hide? Sakura spoke up for the first time, Sasuke-kun, we can hide high up in the topmost part of the trees. Sasuke rose an eyebrow, how is that a good hiding spot? He was surprised that she did not blush once when he spoke to her. Konoha will be expected to be hidden in the trees, but since we know that as well, our enemies will count on us to be on the ground. They would never guess that we will be hidden right above them. Naruto nodded. It was a good plan for a temporary hideout. Fine, we will do that. I'll make my clones and send them away first. He held a half ram and without a wisp of smoke, 40 shadow clones appeared, and disappeared to perform their tasks just as quickly. They settled down at the highest level of a tall tree. Naruto spread his senses out, not wanting to be off guard for even a moment. He took out his spare scrolls and sealing supplies and began preparing the decoys. Remember, as they look for the scroll, they will also be gathering info on the teams to see whether they are weak or strong. As soon as their memories come back to me, I'll go through them to single out the best path for us to go through. You're pulling a lot of weight, Sakura said with some concern. Naruto smirked, but stayed silent. As he finished the decoys, a sudden influx of memories caused his eyes to widen in alarm. His teammates looked at him urgently, with apprehension on their faces. Something had spooked him, and they didn't know many things that could spook the strongest member of their team. He whipped around to glare at them, and they almost flinched at the coldness in his eyes. I'll repeat this, Sakura, Sasuke. If you see the Suna team, run away. You see the kunoichi from Suna, sprint, fly, disappear. I don't care what you do, but avoid confrontation with her at any cost. Is that understood? He glared at them even more coldly, in order to get his seriousness of the statement across. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. Why is she so? Naruto cut him off with a wave of his hand. Face serious, he said, it's just better if you trust me on this one, Sasuke. Now. His expression became neutral once more. I found a team for us to ambush. Remember the team from AIM? They are a mile away from us, northeast. If we hurry, we can catch them before their argument of who gets the fake and real scrolls ends. Sasuke looked at him sharply for switching topics, but didn't push for any more info. He took the lead this time to their target. Just as they stopped behind a large tree, Naruto informed them, the real scroll is with the middle one. Sasuke said, all right. Naruto, do you have a plan? He had accepted the point that it was better if Naruto made the plans between them. Naruto's plans followed utmost discretion in these type of situations, which is what they needed right now. Naruto nodded, soundlessly forming 3 shadow clones. Sasuke, you remember how Kakashi-sensei buried you in the bell test? That is what these 3 will do. In case one of them escapes, you and Sakura will take care of them. Sasuke as well as Sakura gaped at him. That is the best you have? He barely refrained from lashing out because the plan was all kinds of stupid. Naruto smirked in a way that did nothing to comfort the black-haired Avenger. No, but I'm expecting all of them to escape my hold. The decoys I gave you. They are a bit dangerous, so keep a safe distance after giving them away. We will be eliminating the competition entirely, you see. I'm falling back in case they see you, he said, preparing to jump the tree. Why? Naruto glanced at the pink-haired girl. Every plan should have a backup plan. With that he jumped away. The clones formed 3 hand seals and sunk into the ground. Sasuke and Sakura watched with anticipation on what would happen. They were half surprised when all the 3 evaded capture, but only because Naruto had expected them to. The one on the left called out, you wouldn't know subtlety if it hit you in the face, Blondie. He dispelled the clone, with his teammates doing the same. The clones had actually allowed themselves to be dispelled to appear weak. The truth was they had allowed themselves to be detected. He called out, you really thought we'd fall so easily to such pathetic plans? Come on out and we might let you live. You cannot escape. With an angry scowl, Sasuke jumped down with Sakura by his side, eyes wide and wary. It was all up to Naruto now. Where's the Blondie? The AIM-9, who Sasuke suspected was the leader, asked roughly. Sasuke answered in a tight tone, he went to find us a hiding spot after leaving us with the clones. He was absolutely sure that the leader was smirking at them behind his breathing apparatus and said in a mocking tone, all right, kids, hand over your scroll. Sasuke took out the heaven scroll from his pouch and threw it to the leader, who caught it easily. He sounded pleased. A heaven scroll. Perfect. It will go perfectly with our earth scroll. You two, kill them. The 2 behind him took out their kunai and advanced. Sakura stuttered fearfully as she took a step back. Boo, but you said. I said I might let you live, and I decided that I won't. Now hurry up and kill them, he said impatiently. Tally-ho! Came the sound of Naruto's all too joyous roar. Sasuke and Sakura immediately jumped back, but the 3 AIM-9 made the dire mistake of turning in the direction of the voice. The heaven scroll in the leader's hand revealed itself to be a very effective and explosive tag. Sasuke and Sakura, even while being on the ground, were almost blown back a few more feet from the sheer blast. It was a testament to how dangerous the tags Naruto used were. That went quite well, His voice came through the smoke. Sasuke and Sakura looked up to see Naruto grinning, earth scroll in hand. Sasuke just grunted as he stood up. I agree. He was a little disoriented from the blast along with Sakura, but they would be alright in a few seconds. Naruto? Are they? Sakura asked, really not wanting to know. Naruto nodded, of course they are dead. Anyone would be who was standing as close as those three to the tag. He tossed the earth scroll to Sasuke, keep it with yourself. I'll make the decoys. As Sasuke and Sakura covered him, Naruto dropped to his knees and took out his sealing supplies. He steadily inked out the seals for the next 2 minutes, adding a seal to make the scrolls look exactly like the real one, along with a few other additions. Alright, Naruto sighed as he packed up his sealing supplies, handing over the new fakes to Sasuke, who looked confused. Naruto explained, change of plans. You are sticking with the fake scrolls, me and Sakura will keep the earth and heaven. Remember, there is an addition to the fake scrolls. The new ones that I gave you now are smoke screens, so be careful not to mix them up. Sasuke nodded and pocketed the scrolls, giving his blonde teammate a nod of thanks. Okay, same formation as before. This time, we won't be stopping until we reach the tower. They went through the trees again, with Naruto setting a comfortable pace so as to allow the other two to keep up. He could have used Shunshin to get them to the tower faster, but this was a good opportunity to check out any team they come across for the next phase of the exam. It wasn't too long before problems rose. Naruto tensed as he sensed a very familiar, evil Shikri heading their way, and fast. And it wasn't alone. Move people, we have a tail, he ordered as he picked up the pace. Sakura and Sasuke tensed and picked up their pace as well. Naruto motioned for Sasuke to switch positions, as if they were caught up with, Naruto would be able to distract them. Naruto took a glance behind when he flipped over one of the branches. No one was behind them, but Naruto knew that whoever was following them would be catching up with them anytime now. Gritting his teeth, he summoned a 99 shadow clones, all of which transformed into the replicas of the original Team 7. Move, damn it move! He hissed sharply. The clones took off in different directions, each fake team splitting up. Though I suspect it won't be enough, he grimly thought. He ordered his team, alright, just for a short while, move like your ass is on fire. Let's go. They kicked into high gear and as far away as possible. He was somewhat relieved when the large signatures got off their backs. Keeping his senses open, he sensed that the signature was far enough that they could take a short break. He signaled his team to stop on a branch. I know who was following us now, he revealed as he gulped down some much-needed water along with the others. When the other two looked at him, he said, one of them was a giant snake that only seemed interested in making me its meal. The other is the bitch from Kusa that I warned you about. She has wiped out 10 of the 33 team, and she is mad. Bottom line, we need to reach the tower fast. So hold on. When the two gave him questioning looks, he sighed impatiently and said, I'll use the body flicker to move us. Now come on. He almost yelled. They grabbed each of his shoulders tightly so they wouldn't be left behind. Naruto was just about to form the ram seal when his danger sense exploded. He hadn't even molded the chakra for a Shunshin, so he instinctively flash stepped to avoid the attack that obliterated the branch they were on. Reaching the ground, the other two released their hold and got into stances. Sakura was shaking at how close she was from getting blown to pieces. It was only thanks to Naruto's speed that they were able to avoid that. Sasuke gripped the kunai in his hands tighter as he stared into the dust cloud in front of him. He squashed the tiny twinge of fear that went through him. Naruto was very serious about the Kusa kunoichi being dangerous. Based on Naruto's tone, they were fighting an opponent who was possibly stronger than all three of them combined. Kunai had immediately snapped into his hands, with wind chakra coursing through them. He stared impassively at the dust cloud, knowing that whatever was behind it would be possibly threatening their lives in a way much worse than what Zabuza did. Their first priority was to run away, not fight, because they had a worse chances of surviving than a snowball in hell. Plans flashed in his mind, each being discarded instantly as he tried to come up with a one that actually gives them a chance. He wasn't allowed to think further when his eyes widened in alarm. He executed a scissors kick to push his teammates away, just in time for himself to avoid the mouth of the huge snake that tried to swallow him. I cannot fight this snake here. I need more space, damn it. He cursed mentally. He turned in the opposite direction and purposefully set the pace so that he could bait the snake away from his comrades. Sasuke cursed as he tensed up even more, moving himself in front of Sakura. "Sasuke-kun, we have to help Naruto," she screamed, already tensing up to jump when a slick voice, dripping with malicious amusement even while being female, spoke up behind them. "No need to worry about your friend. He will be dead very shortly. You worry about me." Both of them turned around and the tension inside them almost doubled when they saw who it was. It was the kunoichi from Kusa. XXXXXXX. Naruto had already formulated a plan on what to do when he spotted a clearing. The shadow clones from earlier had all dispelled themselves, so the chakra had come back to Naruto. He landed in the clearing and turned around. The snake was huge, easily reaching up to 70 feet in length. As soon as he stopped, the snake lunged with its mouth wide open. He immediately jumped back, easily avoiding the mouth. Forming a shadow clone behind the snake, he instantly switched places with it. So now, the clone was in the field of vision of the snake, giving Naruto full access to its unguarded back. As the clone jumped around the clearing, Naruto hid on a branch and waited for the perfect moment to strike. As soon as he saw the snake getting into position so it was facing the exact opposite direction of the real Naruto, Naruto acted. He had practiced this until he could do it with just one hand seal, and he was so grateful for it. Clapping his hands together, he did it. Sudden, Saidanha. The stream of water that was expelled from his mouth was razor sharp. So sharp that it could cut through thick boulders like a hot knife through butter. It cleanly split the head of the snake from its body. The clone whistled as he walked across to the real Naruto. The now dead snake laid across the full clearing. They both gazed at it for a moment, after which the clone said, "That was downright savage of you." "Thanks." He dispelled the clone and tried to piece his thoughts together. He knew that snakes this big were not there in the forest, so this was a summon. But there are only 2 snake summoners. Anko-sensei is not allowed to interfere as the proctor of this exam, so that leaves. His face paled rapidly as he came to a horrifying conclusion about just who his team was facing. He spread out his senses and cursed when he sensed absolute fear from Sasuke and Sakura's numbness. He disappeared in the fastest shunpo he had performed until today. XXXXXXX. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the immensely potent killing intent that was permeating the air. He landed on a high branch and studied the scene below. The Kusa bitch was staring at Sasuke with a look of amusement, as if she knew she could end him any instant, but was allowing it to play out for her amusement. Naruto's jaw muscles clenched because she was absolutely right. Hell, she could kill himself any instant. Sasuke stood no chance at all against her. Who the hell is this intruder? He silently released all his resistance seals. "Come now, Sasuke-kun, you know you can't win. What will you do?" She chuckled. Sasuke shivered at the tone but spoke, "It's a scroll you want, right? Take it and leave us." He threw the fake scroll to the Kusa-9, who probably thought it was just a regular heaven scroll. He barely refrained from cursing when she just threw it behind her, and the scroll went off in an explosion like the one that killed the team from AIM. "Coo. You don't think I didn't know about the little trick your team pulled off?" she mused in a dark tone. "Damn." Sasuke forced out through gritted teeth. He was gritting them ever since he felt the unnatural killing intent from the kunoichi, to stop from chattering in a show of fear. He was uncontrollably shaking when he felt her killing intent, and had barely stabbed himself in time to avoid being pierced in the head by her kunai. The kunoichi moved, scaring Sasuke, who hurled shuriken at her. "Stay away from me." She dodged it with ease, and was almost upon him when a fist came out of nowhere, smashing into her cheek with such force that she was flown backwards. The woman, however, simply spun midair and landed gracefully. She absently rubbed her cheek as she stared, impressed with his ability to catch her off guard, and the power behind the strike. She looked into the impassive face of one Uzumaki Naruto, amused by the resolve in his eyes. Sasuke, for once in his life, was infinitely glad to see his comrade. Sakura almost sunk in relief at his appearance. My, you escaped, my friend, Naruto-kun." Naruto's face gave nothing away as he answered, "Your friend is dead." The kunoichi looked even more impressed as she looked at him, noting the lack of any scratches or damage on him. "Very impressive, Naruto-kun." Not many can dispatch my friend without sustaining damage, she complimented. Naruto glared at her, and she was faintly reminded of another blonde who glared identically. Why don't you drop the disguise? You're not fooling me. The woman regarded him for a moment and then laughed hard. You're amusing. What makes you think I'm wearing a disguise? Naruto simply stared impassively. That giant snake of yours was a dead giveaway. Only 2 people are known to possess the snake summoning contract. I already know the first, which only leaves one option, Orochimaru of the Chunin. The way you lunged at Sasuke is the snake style of taijutsu, which is another giveaway of your identity. There was no outward reaction from the woman, but inwardly, she was more impressed. What analysis! To be able to observe and deduce things so quickly, and with just one look. That's easily Jonin level thinking. The power behind his strike was easily Jonin level as well, and it was well timed and placed. He must be incredibly talented and skilled. Shame that he's the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, otherwise that body could be mine, he silently complained. Sasuke was barely keeping from shaking. Orochimaru of the Chunin. The S-rank missing 9 from Konoha and former student of the Sendame. We stand no chance against him. Very cleverly deduced, Naruto-kun, the woman said. Anything else you can tell me? Naruto was on an even higher alert, ready to move at the slightest sign of movement from the Chunin. Well, it's quite clear that you were after Sasuke and by extension, his Sharingan. You sent a summon to dispose of me, and didn't even pay attention to Sakura, instead choosing to pick on Sasuke. Am I wrong? Orochimaru chuckled, which turned into a full-blown laugh. He stopped laughing and HED. The skin of the kunoichi was pulled off to reveal an extremely pale man with long, black hair and golden, sleeted eyes surrounded in purple markings, almost like an eye marking. He wore a tan shirt with a long-sleeved black undershirt and a large purple rope around his waist tied in a large knot. Sasuke and Sakura stared in horror at the most infamous missing 9 of Konoha, while Naruto didn't waver from his gaze. You were most interesting, Naruto-kun. Unfortunately, it is not you who I came for, he said, looking at Sasuke and licking his mouth with an unnaturally long tongue. Even Naruto was unable to avoid the shudder at the show of creepiness. He eventually said, sorry but, I can't allow you to have your way with him. I need him intact if we want to pass this phase. With that being said, he made the first move. With lightning speed, he slapped his hand on the ground, a large sealing array erupting from his hand and onto the ground. The clearing was bathed in so much light that Orochimaru grunted and was forced to shield his eyes, lest he became blind. When the light died down, the 3 genin had vanished. Orochimaru simply chuckled, before following them. He's certainly fast. Naruto was flash-stepping like crazy, his teammates held in fireman's carry. Sasuke shouted, put me down, Uzumaki. Naruto didn't miss a beat, only if you're as fast as me or faster. Sasuke shut his mouth and just held on, knowing Naruto was way faster than him. Sakura simply held on for dear life. This was the first time she was moving this fast, or had seen Naruto move this fast. Naruto was going full throttle, knowing Orochimaru would eventually catch up to them. He was hoping to find some help. He sidestepped just in time to avoid being blown away. Orochimaru had caught up to them and was looking highly amused. Face going impassive, he set Sasuke and Sakura down. Sasuke, hang back. It's you he wants. Sasuke scowled, but heeded the other boy's words and moved back to guard Sakura. Naruto had leapt forward to meet Orochimaru, fist to fist. They engaged in a furious bout of taijutsu, both of them becoming blurs. Orochimaru's eyes narrowed. This fighting style seemed somewhat familiar, and the boy was doing far too well. Punches and kicks were being blocked quite easily, but finger jabs were coming too close to vital areas. He needed to stop playing around. Naruto was giving it all, and his frustration was mounting because Orochimaru seemed totally unfazed by his attacks. He was landing hits, but they were barely inflicting any damage. He charged to Kunin with wind chakra, increasing his reach. He was forced to duck when snakes erupted from the Chunin's sleeves. He flash-stepped away, hands lit up by red lightning chakra, causing Orochimaru's eyes to widen. Raiton, Reikurai. The red lightning was barely avoided by the Chunin, who jumped sideways. Naruto immediately flash-stepped to Orochimaru, who was midair, and stabbed him in the heart with a wind-infused kunai. His eyes widened when Orochimaru just turned brown and crumbled into mud. His senses told him the real one was fighting Sasuke. He immediately turned and looked above, cursing mentally when he saw Sasuke being pushed back and taunted by Orochimaru. The Uchiha was blocking every blow, but it was hurting every time a hit was blocked if his contorted face was anything to go by. "How weak you are compared to Naruto-kun, Sasuke-kun," he chuckled, watching the boy try to land a hit on his person. Though he jumped back just in time to avoid another punch in the face. Naruto landed by Sasuke, who was likely panting. Sasuke began to back up, remembering Naruto's words, but a hand kept him in place. He looked at Naruto's impassive expression. "I can't take him on alone, Sasuke. I need your help. It won't beat or kill him, but it might create a chance for us to run away," he said, carefully watching Sasuke. Sasuke breathed deeply, calming himself down. This was the first time Naruto had asked him for help, and it was perfectly justified. Orochimaru was not someone who could be taken out by even Jonin, much less fresh genin. If fighting together gave them a chance to retreat, he was willing to do it. "Let's do it." Naruto smirked for the first time since the fight with Orochimaru started, and both the boys turned to Orochimaru, who chuckled seeing the looks in their eyes. Fighting together. Even that, he was forced to block Naruto, who had flash-stepped in front of him and used the momentum to increase the hit of his kick. Sasuke converged in from above, and both the boys started fighting him. Sasuke was giving it all he had, and Naruto was more than glad to have a partner. He and Sasuke were perfectly managing to fight together, their blows not landing on each other. Weaving between each other's attacks without even grazing the other, the two managed to put a surprised Orochimaru on the defense. Naruto was faster than Sasuke, which meant that Orochimaru had to defend himself from two fighters of irregular speed. His body had to react fast and slow, at different times. Not that difficult for him, but the time it took for him to get used to it. He had already taken too many blows. Jumping back, he formed the snake seal. Futon, Datopa. A huge blast of air roared towards the two boys, who split up to avoid the blast of air. Sasuke sped through hand seals. Gokaku no Jutsu. A huge fireball made its way to Orochimaru, who simply jumped sideways. He was surprised when, suddenly, chains of water wrapped around him and smashed him to the ground. He looked up to see Naruto's fist heading towards his face. Instantly switching places with a log, he avoided the glowing fist of dense, blue liquid that would have likely cracked his jaw. He vanished in a burst of speed and dispelled the shadow clone who was maintaining the water chains. He ran around the boys in a blur, trying to disorient them, but mostly to see if they could follow him. Naruto and Sasuke stood back to back. Naruto was able to follow Orochimaru with his eyes in slower perception, though he doubted his body could move at that speed. Sasuke's Tutamo Sharingan was slowly getting used to Orochimaru's speed, when Orochimaru dashed towards Sasuke. Sasuke acted on instinct, grabbing Naruto's left arm and spinning him once. Naruto let momentum take over, having no time for surprise at Sasuke's choice of attack, and let himself be thrown forward feet first. His shoes met an arm, which he used to jump back to Sasuke. "Che," Naruto said in irritation and jumped up. Orochimaru made to follow him when a cry distracted him. "You focus on me," Sasuke shouted as he dashed to Orochimaru, engaging the man. The Sennin was greatly surprised that all trace of fear was gone from Sasuke. He easily blocked all strikes coming from the boy, but noticed it at the last moment a blonde blur with fist outstretched to meet his stomach. He managed to block it, but was sent skidding to the edge of the branch they were fighting on. He was about to chop the boy unconscious, when a puff of smoke revealed it to be a shadow clone. Sasuke knew how to take advantage of an opening. So when he saw the puff of smoke from Naruto's shadow clone, he wasted no time. Dashing forward, he kicked Orochimaru. He was unsurprised when the man blocked it in a cross position, but the momentum at which he came created enough force to throw Orochimaru off the branch. The pale man only had a moment to show his shock before he was grabbed from the waist and sped headfirst into the lower branch. Naruto had jumped up to a higher branch and shot downwards with great speed, catching the missing 9 from the waist and smashing him headfirst into a lower branch. He honestly did not know how him and Sasuke were working in a tag team so perfectly, reading each other's intentions so clearly, but was glad for it. Sasuke landed next to Naruto, and both watched in disbelief as what Naruto had smashed into the ground was revealed to be a mud clone. They both turned to look the other in his eyes, nodding to each other. Neither of them knew how they communicated like this, but both of them knew what had to be done. Naruto's senses kicked in first, showing Orochimaru heading towards them. He forced himself to react slowly and allowed himself, as well as Sasuke, to be hit. Both flew back from the force of the hit, and pretended to be knocked out as Orochimaru walked closer. What teamwork, you two. I've never seen such fine teamwork before in my life, even my own team. Surprising me with every move is not a feat anyone can perform, but you two managed it very impressively, he praised with a crazy glint in his eyes. Naruto chose to activate the explosive tags he had stuck to the back of Orochimaru's clothing. Orochimaru flew forward and landed face first, caught unawares. Now, Sasuke. Trap him. Yeah. Both of them took out shuriken and held them between the fingers of both their hands. Giving the Sannin no time to recover, they each split up. Orochimaru slowly got up, the burns on his back slowly healing. He had barely recovered when he was wrapped up in ninja wire. Glancing towards his right, he saw Sasuke lodging the shuriken wrapped in ninja wire into a tree on his right. On the left, Naruto had done the same. The wrap around him was so tight, Orochimaru mentally winced as his back hit the bark and the wire dug into his skin, drawing blood. Where is all this teamwork coming from? Kabuto said they did not work together at all. He enforced his skin with chakra when he saw it. Naruto and Sasuke landed on the tree in front of him. Let's go, Naruto. Yeah. Sasuke sped through 4 hand seals while Naruto formed the snake seal. Futon. Ryuka Toba no Jutsu. They both shouted together. The large dragon-shaped flame that came out of Sasuke's mouth was enhanced by the wind jutsu used by Naruto. Orochimaru watched with wide eyes as the utterly humongous dragon made of fire sped towards him. The flames barreled into him, burning his skin off. Naruto and Sasuke watched, with the latter panting heavily and the former critically gazing, as the jutsu hit Orochimaru. Hell, the combination jutsu was so strong that it literally tore apart the area where it impacted. Orochimaru fell downwards, consumed in flames and the upper half of the tree falling as well. Sasuke fell to his knees, trying to catch some breath. He had never spent so much chakra at once, ever. Looking up, he saw Naruto intently staring at the place where the jutsu had hit. Did we get him? He asked between deep breaths. Right now, he could care less if Naruto was exhausted or not. It certainly looks like it, Naruto murmured, trying to see with his senses if they indeed got him. Turning to Sasuke, it doesn't matter if we got him or not. We have a chance to run. That was all he could say when something pink, wet and slimy wrapped around him. He looked down and disgustedly noted that it was a tongue. It pulled him away from Sasuke, who had a similar expression of disgust. He came face to face with Orochimaru, who had not a single scratch on him, only his clothes were a bit burned. He had a smirk on his face as he brought up a hand, 5 purple kanji lighting up on his fingertips. That's enough out of you, Naruto-kun. It was good for him that Naruto was channeling chakra to try and escape, making his seal visible. Naruto's eyes went wide as he recognized the kanji. He had extensively studied this particular seal. The Gajiofa-in was a seal that his mother had highlighted in her notes. It was a seal that was mostly used to throw off the chakra control of a Jinchuriki. He had extensively researched it in relation to his own seal, the 8 trigrams seal, from the notes that his father made while studying it. He hadn't mastered the 8 trigrams sealing style completely, but he knew enough to know what would happen if Orochimaru applied it on him. His seal consisted of 2 4-symbol seals, creating the 8 trigrams seal. The 5-element seal was an odd-numbered seal. If it was applied over his even-numbered seal, his contact with Kurama would be cut off. Speaking of whom? Naruto. Move, you idiot. You know what would? That was all he could hear from Kurama before Orochimaru hissed. Gajiofa-in. His arm shot to make contact with Naruto's seal. Pain. It exploded onto Naruto, overwhelming his senses and setting his nerve endings on fire. It was such unmatched agony that his vision blackened moments before he did. He couldn't even scream in pain when he was suddenly unconscious. The last thing he saw before falling asleep was Orochimaru throwing him off. XXXXXXX. Sakura was in complete awe as she witnessed the tag teaming between Naruto and Sasuke. She had never even imagined that Naruto and Sasuke, who seemed complete opposites of each other, could work so perfectly. It was only the seriousness of their situation that stopped her from cheering her on. She pumped a fist up in victory when she saw the Sannin getting swallowed by the huge fire jutsu that Naruto and Sasuke cast together. Her feeling of joy turned to downright horror when she saw that Orochimaru had survived, without a scratch. It was only pure reflex that she managed to pin Naruto to a tree before he fell to his death. She watched, utterly terrified, Butch got in front of Sasuke with a kunai held in reverse grip. She wouldn't let anything happen to Sasuke, she thought. Orochimaru suddenly sprung forward to her disgust and horror with his neck elongated and extended, fangs bared. Sasuke pushed her aside, allowing the Snake Nine to sink his fangs into the boy's neck, causing some sort of seal to appear. His scream though. It was terrible and she was sick of hearing it. Sasuke fell to his knees, still screaming, and then he abruptly stopped and slumped forward, unconscious but still in pain. Orochimaru chuckled and looked down at Sasuke with satisfaction in his eyes. Now, show me more of your power, Sasuke-kun. You were good, but can be far greater than Naruto-kun. He then glanced at the pink-haired girl, who flinched at his gaze. He chuckled, "Don't worry, Sakura-san, you are not my target. If you quietly hand me your Earth Scroll, I won't kill you." He watched as the pink-haired girl pulled out the Earth Scroll from her pouch and held it out with trembling hands. He took it from her hands and promptly vanished in a swirl of leaves. Sakura fell to her knees in relief and exhaustion. She shivered at the way he addressed her. It felt completely wrong. She looked at Naruto hanging from the kunai on the tree and Sasuke on the ground, and for the first time in a long time, she felt completely and utterly hopeless. XXXXXXX. Naruto slowly opened his eyes, groaning in pain as he got that Orochimaru was on tough bastard. He grimaced. "Kurama, you there?" The only thing that greeted him was the great demon's silence. "Yep, as I suspected. He's been completely cut off. And I can't undo the seal because the counter requires chakra control of a Jonin at the least, not to mention that it will require a foreign chakra other than mine." He made a half-ram seal and tried to create a shadow clone, but it looked worse than death. Pale skin tone, as sturdy as a blade of grass. Not to mention he could barely get up from lying on the ground before getting dispelled. Naruto tried it again, this time with the cross seal. He nodded in relief when the healthy shadow clone appeared. Dispelling it, he tried to sense chakra signatures, but had much difficulty in molding the chakra in the required way. He sighed and got up, stumbling from the head rush that he got. He steadied himself for a few seconds, then nodded. Other than terrible chakra control, he was physically fine. Mostly. As he stepped out from the underside of the tree, his eyes widened when he saw what was going on. Sakura was on the ground, looking like she was attacked by all the terror in the world. Team 10 was behind the bushes, looking terrified. Their bodies were filled with tension as they gazed at the scene before them. He even saw Tenten, an unknown boy, standing on a branch, trying to decide what to do. Seeing their gazes fixed on N unconsciously, he deduced that this was Team 9. Sasuke was standing, but he looked so much different from the last time Naruto had seen him. He was covered in black marks, almost like waves in a pattern upon his skin. And he was standing behind a member of the Oto team, Zaku, if he remembered correctly, with a leg on his back and pulling on his arms. Zaku was screaming his throat raw, though Naruto couldn't blame him after seeing the way Sasuke was tearing his arms off. Wasting no time, he acted. Sasuke was out of his mind right now, no doubt being influenced by the evil, tainted chakra that was pouring off of him in waves. In a single flash step, he appeared in front of Sasuke. He was grateful that the flash step was simple enough that he only needed to push off after building up chakra in his feet. He delivered a chakra-enhanced open palm thrust right into Sasuke's stomach, knocking the air out of his shocked teammate. Sasuke was thrilled at the power that was coursing through him. It addled his mind, but he couldn't care less. It was like an adrenaline shot to his system, which made him feel more powerful than ever before. He needed to test this power out. The feeling of this power. His goal of killing his brother seemed a lot closer suddenly. He made short work of the Oto team and was about to permanently rip the arms off the last one. He was enjoying this, the effortlessness with which he was dispatching them. He absently wondered if this was how Naruto felt. Being stronger than anyone else standing before yourself. He was so into the task of ripping arms off that he was caught off guard when Naruto suddenly appeared in front of him, thrusting a palm in his stomach. All the breath left him in an instant as his hold on the Oto 9's arms loosened. Naruto turned towards Zaku, who was close to losing consciousness. He looked at the 9 whose face was covered with bandages. "Take him away before my teammate tries it again," he ordered. The 9 gulped as he gazed into the icy blues of the blonde. His stance, his way of speaking, the sheer power and resolve in those eyes. He had no doubt that this guy was somewhere at the top in power rankings of Genin. He doubted even Sasuke could match him with the curse mark's power. He also knew that he was no match for him. "Naruto, is it?" he asked, making Naruto narrow his eyes and nod. He slowly held out their team's Earth Scroll. "You are, no doubt, too strong for us to take on. So I'll make an exchange. Let us leave, and we will give you our Earth Scroll." He dropped the scroll at Naruto's feet. Naruto's thoughts raced as he calmly picked up the Earth Scroll. Had they lost theirs? The Gajio fan had knocked him out for a day, that much he knew. He put the Earth Scroll in his left hip pouch and mentally sighed in relief when he felt the Heaven Scroll exactly where he had put it. He kept his posture straight. No need to indicate that he was, at the moment, weak as hell. He nodded and watched as the 9 picked up his teammate and took to the trees. He was about to sit down to take a breather. He had still not fully recovered when his danger sense exploded. Shikamaru's voice rang out an instant later. "Naruto, watch out." Naruto instinctively responded. His upper body bent down, left leg lifting high behind to catch Sasuke right in his chin. The counterattack knocked Sasuke back. Naruto watched in complete surprise. "Sasuke, what the hell are you doing?" His heart dropped seeing the smirk on Sasuke's face. Sasuke spoke, testing this power, Uzumaki. "I've never felt so powerful before. It feels like I can take on anyone, even Itachi. But first, I will see how you fare against this power. I will finally beat you today." He was sounding more like a power-hungry maniac at the end than the emo bastard Naruto was used to dealing with. He jumped back, yelling out, "Everyone stay back." Though this was bad for him. He was far from his peak condition, whereas Sasuke was fighting him with a power-up. He would have to knock the guy out. That was his only option right now. Sasuke rushed at him with speed. Naruto clearly remembered Sasuke not having the day before. He blocked the punch to his face, but was forced to remain on the defense as Sasuke did not let up his assault. He grunted as he felt the force behind Sasuke's strikes. "Sasuke, stop it. We are teammates, not enemies." Sasuke only laughed. "Ha! That doesn't matter to me. You will go down today." He then ducked as Naruto pulled out a kunai and made rapid slashes at him. Sasuke grit his teeth when he was forced to dodge every slash with a hair's breadth. But he also observed that he was easily reading Naruto's movements. Having gotten used to Orochimaru's speed, Naruto's was quite slower. He took advantage of an opening and caught his hand, giving the blonde's wrist a thrust that launched the kunai a few feet above their heads. Naruto wasted no time and jumped up, performing a flawless front flip that allowed his right heel to kick the kunai directly at Sasuke's face. Predictably, Sasuke easily dodged it, allowing the kunai to stick into the ground behind him, following with what was an effortless block to Naruto's left leg that was coming down on him. Naruto used the hand to flip off 20 feet back. Sasuke scoffed, "Do you think such weak and pitiful maneuvers can defeat me? Get real." He then sped through hand signs. Ryukin no Jutsu. Naruto watched wide-eyed as a huge flame shaped like a dragon headed towards him. He barely completed the hand signs in time when he was swallowed by flames. Sasuke smirked as he watched Naruto getting hit by his jutsu head-on. When the flames dispersed, instead of seeing the expected form of his teammate covered in burns, his eyes widened when all he saw was a kunai lying in the middle of the flames. He had no time to react when he was grabbed in a tight chokehold from behind. Naruto grunted as he struggled to keep the choke on Sasuke. Sasuke's jutsu was powerful, extraordinarily so, but the drawback was equally big as well. The huge wall of fire had cut off Sasuke's vision of him, which allowed Naruto to substitute with a kunai lodged behind Sasuke. The Konoha teams got out from their spots and in front of them, looking tensed. Shikamaru lived up to his reputation as a genius when he correctly deduced the reason behind Sasuke's momentary madness. That evil, tainted chakra that was clearly not Sasuke's must have caused this, he realized. He was ready for the moment when Naruto would call for help. He had also noticed, despite Naruto hiding it very well, that Naruto was banged up as well. He was not in peak condition, and stood very low chance against an enhanced Sasuke. Though he was surprised, yet again, when his blonde friend managed to put Sasuke in a position where he held the advantage. Naruto had tightened his choke, but Sasuke was still putting up a vicious struggle. He tentatively called out, "Naruto, do you?" Naruto just grunted a reply, "Don't worry, Shikamaru," he grunted as he leant his head back to avoid a headbutt and a broken nose. "He just needs to calm down." He grunted when Sasuke slammed an elbow into his ribs. Naruto finally let his anger show. "Why you?" In the show of savageness that surprised all, Naruto, who still had the choke on Sasuke, slammed his captive's head to the tree nest to him hard. Sasuke went down like a sack of potatoes, the black marks receding from his skin. Hell, Naruto had smashed Sasuke's head into the bark so hard that even the bark had cracked a bit. Naruto panted hard as he stared at the unconscious form of his teammate. This fight had taken a lot more out of him than he expected. The five-element seal is proving to be troublesome, he thought teretely. Shikamaru watched as his friend almost tipped forward to face plant, and immediately caught him, gently sitting him on the ground. "Are you alright, Naruto?" he asked in concern. He had never seen Naruto look even winded. But now, all he could see was exhaustion and hurt. There wasn't a single trace of the usual energy that Naruto always kept contained in him. Naruto chuckled, "No. I'm really not, Shika." He wanted nothing more than to just sleep, but a part of his mind was telling him that they still needed to reach the tower. Choji walked up to him, "Can you keep going, though?" Naruto slowly stood up, and both the boys tensed when they saw him sway a little before righting himself. Putting a hand in his hip pouch, he took out a soldier pill and was about to swallow it when he stopped. He really didn't need any more exhaustion when the effects of the pill ran out. He put it back. "Yeah, I'm good." He almost fell back down when he was hugged by a sobbing Sakura. He took a moment to realize how terrified she was. He just wrapped his arms around her, slowly stroking her hair, which was cut, now that he realized it. "Thank Kami you're all right." She sniffled into his chest. She was so relieved when Sasuke had come to her rescue, but that relief had turned to terror when she saw how ruthlessly Sasuke dealt with the other team. She almost couldn't take it anymore when Naruto appeared. She watched in anticipation as Naruto narrowly scraped a victory against Sasuke and managed to knock him out. Naruto looked to be in worse condition, but she sobbed in relief when he managed to win. He released Sakura, who looked up at him with tearful and fearful eyes. He kept his hands on her shoulders and said in a serious voice, "Sakura, we need to reach the tower. We can no longer delay. Shikamaru." The said boy straightened up at the call. "We're moving. We will meet you at the tower." He nodded, even though a part of him was concerned for his friend. "What about Lee?" Sakura asked worriedly, looking over to the unconscious boy. Naruto looked at him with thoughtfulness when the voice cut through his musings. "We'll be taking him. I suppose he got into another fight he couldn't handle?" A boy Hyuga, upon seeing the eyes with long brown hair pulled back in a low ponytail and a taillate on his forehead said, and with him was Tenten, who looked at him in concern. "Don't worry Tenten, I'm good for now," he assured her. The said girl sighed, "I can totally see that. I better see you at the tower, Blondie." Neji picked up Lee, slinging him over their shoulder, and with a nod to Tenten, they were gone. "That was quite abrupt," Teno mumbled, frowning. Naruto said, "That's how they do." "Well, we better get going as well," he reminded them. With a goodbye to Team 10, they departed in different directions. Naruto made a shadow clone, who picked up Sasuke bridal style, and with a signal, they started running. He deliberately kept to the ground because right now, his body was hurting with every step. He doubted he could tree hop in his current condition. That damn snake had really messed up with his chakra control, he lamented. "Naruto, what about Sasuke-kun?" Sakura's timid voice broke through his thoughts. Naruto glanced back at her, and then at Sasuke, who was still knocked out. He would have applied a seal on him to keep him knocked out, but applying seals with just your hands and chakra required high Chunin level chakra control, which Naruto really didn't have right now. He will wake up in a while, Sakura, he vaguely replied. Even he wasn't sure how long would it take for Sasuke to wake up, with how hard he had slammed him against the tree. He was also worried on how Sasuke would react once he woke up. Sasuke was already sour on being weaker than him, but now that he got beaten by a weaker Naruto while himself being powered up more than ever, Naruto really didn't want to think about it. He and Sakura kept running in silence, and by the time it was late evening, the tower finally came into view. He turned to Sakura, fishing out his storage scroll and taking out 2 water cans. "One small break, then we rest directly at the tower," he said, taking a sip of water. Sakura nodded at his words, before looking at Sasuke in concern. The said boy was on the ground, the shadow clone carrying him dispelled for the moment. They finished drinking and Naruto was about to summon another clone when Sasuke stirred. He stopped, and both of them looked to Sasuke in anticipation, who sat up, groaning. Sasuke slowly opened his eyes, thankful for the dark sky. Groaning, he sat up, his body unusually stiff. He turned his head, saw his 2 teammates, looking at him in concern. He tried to remember what happened. He remembered waking up at least. What the hell happened? I woke up. Sakura was being attacked by the Yoto team? After that, I was suddenly powerful. His memory drew a blank after that, but he winced as the mark on his shoulder burned a little. What happened? He asked Naruto in a low groan. He did not notice Naruto blink in confusion, nor the slight relaxing of his shoulders. Naruto couldn't believe it. He wanted to, but it was better to confirm. You don't remember? An annoyed face looked at him. I wouldn't have asked if I did, idiot. Sakura opened her mouth to tell that Naruto had knocked him out of his temporary insanity, but a look from Naruto silenced her. She gave him a confused look, silently asking why, but Naruto shook his head. Naruto turned to Sasuke. An unlucky circumstance is what happened. The Yoto team ambushed us in the branches. A hail of kunai came towards us, forcing us apart. You just happened to land on a branch that had wet moss on it. Your foot slipped, but luckily, since it was a lower branch, you only smacked your head instead of breaking your neck, he smoothly lied. He was really glad for what actually happened. He wondered if it was just his luck that Sasuke suffered short-term memory loss. It was better if Sasuke's defeat was kept secret. He handed a water can to the boy, who nodded gratefully. While he was drinking, Naruto took Sakura aside and explained. Listen Sakura, Sasuke cannot know that I knocked him out, he whispered. Sakura asked in confusion and a little bit of fear, but why? Naruto looked at her in seriousness. You saw how he acted when he tapped into that power, right? At Sakura's nod he continued, he's already insecure as it is, about being strong enough or not. The truth might send him over the edge again. You really don't want him attacking us, do you? He was glad that Sakura finally saw the truth in his words. He turned back to Sasuke, who had finished drinking the entire water can. You ready to move, Sasuke? The tower is only 2 miles out now. Sasuke chucked the water can into a nearby bush. Let's move. We'll stop at the tower. He was about to take the lead when Sakura stopped him. No, Sasuke-kun. Naruto still hasn't recovered from Orochimaru's attack. We have to move slowly, so it's better if Naruto took the lead. Sasuke was surprised at Sakura's suggestion and looked at Naruto. Now that his head was clear, he was surprised how tired and exhausted Naruto looked. What did Orochimaru do to you? Fucked up my chakra control, was the blunt reply he received. He nodded in understanding, though he was still sour about not taking the lead. The team started running again, and Sasuke was surprised that they did not take to the branches. Closely looking at Naruto, he narrowed his eyes when he saw Naruto's slightly winced face. It was hurting the blonde to even run. They finally reached the tower, and Naruto almost fell from exhaustion when Sasuke caught him. I didn't know a simple chakra suppression seal could do this to you of all people, he said with narrowed eyes. Naruto weakly shrugged. Sasuke then seemed to think for a moment and asked again. Can't you use Jutsu to fix it? Naruto glanced at him tiredly. The chakra control I require to perform the seal is beyond me right now. I'll need someone else to fix it. With that, they walked into the tower, with Naruto's arm supported around Sasuke's shoulder and Sasuke's arm supporting his waist. When they entered, they encountered a riddle. If you do not possess heaven, gain knowledge and be prepared. If you do not possess earth, run through the fields and see strength. If you open both heaven and earth, dangerous paths will turn safe. This is the secret of something something. It shall lead you on your way. Naruto did not even need to think. It's telling us to open the scrolls. Sasuke and Sakura nodded. Sakura pulled out her earth scroll, while Naruto handed the heaven scroll to Sasuke. Both of them slowly opened it, unsure whether it's a trap or not. Naruto instantly recognized the seals in the scrolls and exclaimed, "It's a summoning seal. Throw it away." Both Sasuke and Sakura did as Naruto said, tensing up in preparation of any threat. They were not prepared for Iruka popping out of them, at first with a smile and a wave, then horror took over his features when he saw how badly they were beaten up, especially Naruto. "Kami, what happened to you three?" he stuttered. Naruto took the lead, stepping forward. "Iruka-sensei, is it possible for me to meet Hokage Gigi sometime tomorrow? I've got some very grave news." Iruka shook his head. "The next phase of this exam is in 3 days, Naruto. And in that period, none of the genin are allowed to interact with their senses, much less the Hokage." Naruto sighed and motioned Iruka to come closer. Once he whispered in the man's ear, "I'm pretty sure the news of Orochimaru being in the exams and ambushing us is quite important." Iruka's eyes, if possible, widened further in horror. "Orochimaru?" he exclaimed in horror. He then regained his composure and said, "I'll be sure to report this to the Hokage, but you can't meet him right now." Naruto narrowed his eyes. "I've got more to tell." "Then tell me. I'll relay it to the Hokage." Naruto waved his finger. Iruka-sensei. Orochimaru is an S-rank missing 9 and so, any information relating to him is S-rank. Only the Hokage can't know. If he tells it you, no problem. But I'm only telling the Hokage." He even crossed his arms, showing that he was not changing his opinion. Iruka grit his teeth. Of all the times for Naruto to be as stubborn as a mule, it had to be now. But he also knew that he would only be wasting his efforts trying to convince him otherwise. He sighed in resignation. "All right, I'll tell the Hokage that you've got news about Orochimaru," he hastily continued upon seeing the satisfaction on Naruto's face, "but it's up to him if he wants to visit you in the 3-day period. Even the Hokage has to follow the rules, you know." Naruto shrugged, his work completed. There was no way Gigi wouldn't come to see him. Orochimaru was his former student and a very infamous missing 9. Of course he would want to know why his student was lurking around Konoha during the Chunin exams. Besides, he was also counting on Gigi to remove the Gajio fan from him. He wanted to be in top form for the next phase. "All right, I'll take you 3 to your room now." Iruka beckoned them to follow and started walking. Naruto took a step and almost cried out in frustration when he almost face-planted again. If not for Sasuke catching him in time, his nose would be surely broken. The 3 followed in the same way they had entered the tower, with Sasuke supporting Naruto. They went up a set of stairs, past the canteen and into a hallway where he opened a room for them. They entered gratefully. "Naruto, get some rest and come out only when you feel rested, okay?" He received a tired nod in return. He turned to Naruto's teammates. "You two, take care as well." He closed the door after that. Sasuke helped Naruto to a bed and seated him. Naruto nodded his thanks to him and not bothering to say anything else, he flopped face first onto his bed and was out like a light. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.